Jen needs to be on it tonight. I'm tired.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we finished up and all had bio breaks. With that, I call this meeting to order. April 2nd, it's the work session. Ms. Widener, roll call, please.
Dr. Campley?
Here.
Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Mr. Liggett?
Here.
Mr. McKinney?
Here.
Mrs. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Saylor?
Here.
Dr. Weston?
Here.
Miss White?
Here. 1.03, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, and with that, we'll have just a moment of silent reflection. I should have said it. All right, thank you. 105. Mr. Saylor, would you please, mid-chew, read the mission statement for the Perkiomen Valley School District?
The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally.
Thank you so much. 1.06 is an approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Against? Motion passes. I have a little bit of a delay here. 1.07, comments on any topic. Members from the community will be afforded 3 minutes each to comment on anything that they would like at the start of the meeting. Please state your name and municipality. I do ask that the decorum that you use would be the same that you would use in a classroom or in your workplace. If you need to take a break and step away from the meeting to come back, you're more than welcome to do that, and then you would be able to comment at that point. And with that, I will start with the sign-in first. And my first sign-in is Debbie Leonetti.
Sorry. Debbie Leonetti, Skipback Township. I would like to give an update on the student prisoners being transferred to our district and will be housed at SCI Phoenix, also known as Graterford Prison. I had a meeting with Tracy Pennicook today. It looks like the students are still on schedule to move into the building at the end of May. The building is in a secure location on the prison grounds. It is a new building that was supposed to house women. The maximum number of students will be 45, aged 14 to 21. They are all felons, incarcerated for assault, rape, drugs, and murder. One interesting fact I found out, plans for this program started before the November election, without any input from local elected officials. Tracy found out about it in December. She believes negotiations between the Department of Corrections and Department of Education began in October. There is a similar program in Allegheny County in western PA. The cost is being funded by the Department of Education. As of right now, they will need 19 and maybe up to 21 specially trained teachers. So the ratio of students to teachers is a little over 2 to 1, much better than our own students. Many of the classes will be virtual. Why do they need specially trained teachers if they're virtual? Supposedly the tax dollars will follow the student. What if their school taxes are less than PV? We have one of the highest taxes in the county. Who pays the difference? There are many questions that have yet to be answered by this district. Tracy has been asking questions and she's been getting a lot of I don't knows. Is there a contract with the Department of Education? How long is the contract? What are the details? How much learning is virtual or in person? Dr. Russell mentioned she could hire the teachers or hire an outside contractor to do this. Who pays for the contractor if that route is being taken? Who pays for the teacher's retirement, 401k, pension, and health insurance? I was told the school district would have to pay. What is the salary of these specially trained teachers, and who pays for their training? Are there any renovations that need to be made to the building? If so, who is paying for that? Can you guarantee that we will never pay extra school taxes for this program? If the answer is I don't know, then the school board should be pushing back and demanding concrete answers. Remember, you represent us. Tracy's assistant, Sean, will be touring the facility on Friday, April 5th. He will report back his findings along with photos. I find it disheartening that the school district can find time to educate and house felon students, but can't seem to get all the police officers in place that they voted on nearly 1 year ago. By the way, what is the status of them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim Jagger?
Tim Jagger, Lower Frederick. First, I want to talk about, since we were talking about the Safe Schools website at the policy committee meeting, I took it upon myself to look at the information there and look at the information they had from the last school year. I wanted to talk about the numbers, both for those that are unaware and also to make sure that I'm looking at it correctly. Under the infraction tab, it showed we had an enrollment last year of 5,031 students, with 2,929 incidents caused by 802 individuals. Out of the 700 plus districts and cyber schools on that list, that puts us at the 9th highest amount of incidents in the state. And if you break it down to incidents per enrollment, that only moves our district to 30th, which still isn't good. Now, when looking at the 50-ish categories that these incidents could be categorized under, we have 90% of the incidents categorized as school code of conduct, which I'm wondering what all that encompasses, and if not all incidents are being properly categorized, since the categories go from vaping and bullying out to extremes like arson and suicide. So it'd be nice to have some clarity on what all would be included in the school code of conduct category versus all the others, since it would be hard to determine what areas of behavior would need to be addressed in the categories if they're not being properly utilized, especially with 95% being noted as school code of conduct. Secondly, I wanted to mention that I saw in the meeting that there's a motion to approve the middle school schedule with the added intervention and enrichment period included. Me personally, I don't believe we should be taking time away from the core classes to be adding this to the schedule. I understand everyone learns at different paces and some students might need help, but I believe there is already an advisory period for many of those students that need the assistance. It just seems like the students that don't need the assistance will be losing valuable core class time where they could be learning, but instead they're going to be wasting 30 minutes of their day. And lastly, I'm sure everybody was waiting for me to talk about this one, the Day of Silence. Didn't we just have a week of bullying awareness not too long ago? And why are we having a special day for one group of people? When is the Racial Day of Silence, or the Religious Day of Silence, or the Straight Day of Silence? All groups are bullied, harassed, intimidated, or afraid to speak up for fear of repercussions. So to single out and promote a day for one group is in itself a form of discrimination against all the other groups facing bullying and harassment. By giving one group a special day, you're sending more of a divisive message and categorizing people into groups versus sending a unifying message of bullying and harassment by anyone against anyone is wrong. Now, I was told that students do not have to participate in this activity, but in reality, if they go to school that day, they are forced to be a participant because the day is going to be centered around the Day of Silence theme and promoting awareness. So I'm also wondering,
Thank you very much. Amber Dorr?
Much taller. Amber Dorr, Skipback Township. I will start by saying I realize we are moving forward with AR 103, not back. However, I think for the community and students' sake, you, the board, need to provide clarity around the AR to establish credibility with its implementation. Tonight, I want to focus on that clarity. How does the administration plan to execute the policy so that the entire student body, in the name of inclusivity, feels supported, like their voice matters, and most importantly, feel comfortable using the bathroom and locker rooms during school? My understanding from past meetings, and I've missed some, so maybe I'm incorrect, someone had mentioned approved list of individuals who is permitted to use a bathroom they identify with instead of a bathroom aligned with their biological sex based on criteria. I also have heard something about counselors in the schools will know who is permitted. This part of the implementation, I believe, was to assure the community and students that there would be guardrails in place to deter bathrooms and locker rooms from becoming a free-for-all. My question is, This list or counselors, how will that be managed? I can imagine there needs to be a process in place by which administration within each school so that the faculty and students know who is allowed and who is not allowed. Without that, there could be potentially lead to increased deviant behavior within the school walls, which ironically Mr. Jagger talked about. My point, how are parents and students supposed to feel confident around the AR 103? How is it being monitored and enforced? How are the bathrooms today monitored to deter inappropriate behavior? What are the consequences? We know we have a policy around drugs and smoking, yet it happens here all the time. How is a biological female, a male, or really any student supposed to even know who, if that gender nonconforming student or any student is on an approved list or is known by a counselor? I think we can all agree, or most, that we teach our kids from a young age to run from a situation or say something if something doesn't feel right. Trust your gut. It starts in pre-K with stranger danger. We talk about home life, school life. If you speak up if you're not comfortable. Yet here we are telling our students to suck it up. Put your own feelings aside so someone else does not feel uncomfortable. How are PV students supposed to know who is on an approved list so that when there is someone in the bathroom that is up to no good, they can speak out without retaliation? It has been made clear, even by the student liaison, that PV students do not feel comfortable speaking out without fear of retaliation. And please do not twist my words on social media. This is not about hate towards any one student or any one group. This is really about protecting all students against nefarious situations in the bathrooms and locker rooms. We are basically telling all of our students to not ask questions, to keep their head down, and keep your feelings of being uncomfortable to yourself. They don't matter.
Thank you very much. Lisa McHale.
Lisa McHale, Perkiomen Township. Sorry. Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about the SEL programs that have been proposed. I've recently been reviewing the second step on character strong SEL programs and how they might affect students and teachers here at PV. I was hoping there could be some discussion on questions many of us have here. While social and emotional learning has a nice ring to it and may sound perfectly reasonable on the surface, after looking deeper, these programs being proposed have a concerning amount of invasive observation and prying into the students' private home and family lifestyles through student questionnaires and surveys. Many concerns come to mind, such as what data exists that shows teachers or even counselors are better equipped than students' own parents or licensed psychologists at identifying and defining emotional problems in students that might affect their social outcomes. And what studies have been conducted to show that these programs will actually even produce well-rounded social learners? How does Perkiomen Valley define a well-rounded social and emotional learner? To whose standards will these students be accountable to? Will they be held to the social standards currently being imposed as demonstrated by the newly elected board by eliminating a reasonable and fair bathroom policy that protected women and girls? What studies show that the tax dollars spent on this type of curriculum is efficient and cost effective? And why does the administration feel they need to do the job of that parents have already been given? Implementation of these types of programs will take important time away from the basic and fundamental academics and will deter teachers from focusing on the job they were hired to do and once loved. Lastly, many in this community are deeply disturbed by what's currently been happening in the school bathrooms these days, even beyond the retiring of Policy 720 and the newly adopted administrative regulation. Many would like to know why there is no definitive bathroom policy in the first place, and why are the consequences of these matters and incidents not clearly spelled out ahead of time through a clear-cut policy and just being dealt with after the fact when it's too late? Many would like some answers on all these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the committed comments. Would anyone else like to say anything? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. Mears?
Thank you. Kim Mayer, Skipback Township. I have just some really asking for questions, or asking questions. So on March 5th, I noticed that there was a visit from some school board members and administrators who went to look at the Youth Developmental Center in Pittstown, Pennsylvania. That's on the public agenda website. It's an attachment in the committee minutes. So I understand that we have an obligation, or we're being told as the LEA, that we need to provide for these students. And in reading the notes, it said that the MCIU oversees several facilities, like the one that's planned in our district. So my questions are, have we checked with the MCIU to find out how these other programs that are overseen by the MCIU, how are they paid for? Because as a taxpayer, I continue to be surprised at the small amount of information available to the taxpayers in Perkins Valley School District. So I'm asking the administration and the school board members to really press on this issue. As we just heard, it sounds like there's just not a lot of information available, but I'm asking that you find out that information and share it publicly. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to section 2, reports and presentations. We are without student reps tonight, so we will skip 2.01, 2.02, President's Report. I don't have anything to share specifically. 2.03, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Russell?
Thank you, Ms. White. And hopefully we can address at least some of the questions that came through our comments this evening. So I have 6 topics that I'd like to move through, and some will take a few minutes longer than others. We're going to begin with school safety. I kept the slide in here about who we are and what we are about, just as we embark upon this report. My first point of interest is really around school safety. And this opportunity emerged coming out of the Safety and Operations and Policy Committee conversations most recently, and really related to vaping. There's some data that I've included in my report that indicates, based on a survey administered by the Food and Drug Administration in connection to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, about youth tobacco use. So you'll find this interesting. There are some positive points in these data, as well as some very negative ones. It connects to the concern that we have as a school district with vaping in our high school in particular, and some of the efforts that we are considering, steps we'd like to take to combat vaping on the part of our students in our high schools. So these are data that came right from the FDA website. It's linked at the bottom. You can take some time to look at this, but there are a lot of young people engaging with e-cigarettes or vapes today. So to dive in a little bit deeper, I've asked Chief Miller and Mr. Ganesh to share responses to some questions that emerged when we had some deeper discussions at Policy and Safety and Operations Committees recently. So Chief Miller is here tonight, and he'll talk to us just a little bit about answers to these first 3 questions. These came up by, or were raised by, committee members. And he and Mr. Ganesh will tag team on question 4 here, and then finally Mr. Ganesh can give us some information in response to question 5. In addition, I have included a link under Title 18 of the Crimes Code that indicates some details about vaping and tobacco use. So Chief Miller will talk a little bit about the legal aspects of these things. You can also access additional information by clicking on the link. So I'll turn it over to Chief Miller at this point, and then certainly if the board has questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. My apologies at my backs to all of you. So in the conversations that Dr. Russell and I and several others have had about the issues with vaping, obviously we're dealing with it on a regular basis. Administrators here at the high school and as well in our middle schools are seeing frequencies that we're not comfortable with. Mr. Fabrizio and his staff are seeing issues with plumbing when these products are disposed of inappropriately, so they get into our drain lines and our public sewer system, and we end up having to clean out and spend a little bit extra money that we weren't planning on spending, obviously, to do just that, because they're being disposed of in our restrooms when students are using them. So there's been a number of discussions about what can we do to curb this, how can we curtail it. We've increased our observations in the restrooms as best possible, encouraging our security and safety staff to be not passing a bathroom, but at least checking in on it, seeing what's going on inside. We're trying to do that across the board with all of our staff, so whether it's teachers, counselors, administrators, whoever may be in the building, to just check in and see that things are, being carried out normally in there. If there's an issue, that we can address it. So one of the questions was, what is a vape? What are we dealing with? So we're called upon by the state to comply with Section 6306 of the Crimes Code, which Dr. Russell provided a link here to, but it defines for us what the vaping is that we're dealing with and what that looks like. So you'll notice here in the first part under Section A that it lists a summary offense if any pupil possesses or uses any tobacco product in a school building, on a bus, any kind of school conveyance, any kind of school activity. And what does that look like? So they define pupils, and there's a lot of data in here. I'm just going to touch on a few of them. So anyone in the public schools between the ages of 6 and 21, this is who this pertains to. And it calls upon us as a district to have a policy that supports this particular piece of legislation, which we do, and that's District Policy 222, which is almost verbatim language to the Crimes Code section. It should be interesting to note, though, that this section deals with tobacco products much like you and I would refer to cigarette products in our day. And these vaping products in general are not those that are laden with some kind of other drug material or a controlled substance. So this simply deals with a tobacco product, if you will, or a nicotine delivery system. It's all spelled out within the regulations, and it tells us what we can and can't do with regards to that. So any of these products, any paraphernalia that's tied into these vapes is prohibited across the board. Anything that can deliver that nicotine product, whether it's electronic or not, are the things that we should be looking for. It does say that if we find it, we are permitted under law to cite these individuals with a summary offense. So a summary offense is a ticket before the district magistrate, but it goes so far to say in this particular legislation that this particular behavior shall not be reportable as a criminal act. So we're not criminalizing this in the sense that we're punishing our students with a record that follows them, but we are inflicting upon them through the courts a penalty, which is the fine, which in its entirety returns back to the district. If we're looking at a vape that we may find has some kind of controlled substance on it, now we're dealing with an entirely different section. We're dealing with the Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act, which prohibits the use, obviously, of these controlled substances. So that's kind of at next level. But simply having the vapes is what's causing the problem for us. So again, as in years past, you threw a cigarette down the toilet in your high school, it would disintegrate somewhere within the system. Well, we're not having that now because now we're talking with a small, typically electronic device that obviously does not disintegrate, which is, again, what's causing the problem for our operations team. So one of the other questions that came up is, what are we doing with this? What's the searching process look like? So there's two levels of searching here that I just wanted to touch on very briefly. If an administrator of the school, staff member, is conducting that search, they need reasonable suspicion. We believe that student X is holding a vape. And our policy on searching, 226, allows that to happen. We have the authority to conduct a search of our students while they're in the bus, while they're in the school, while they're on a school event. And administrators are doing this routinely. If they find something, then they're reaching out to the parent. This is what we found. This is what we're doing with it. This is how we're going to handle it. If it becomes to the level where it's now some sort of drug paraphernalia, where it's laden with some other kind of product, then it may become a law enforcement issue. Law enforcement has a higher standard. They must have probable cause. So not just a reasonable suspicion that someone's holding it, but I have concrete evidence or something very close to that, which allows them to reach that far. Obviously, We don't want to be going that way. We want to be handling it with internal discipline. We want to be coaching these kids, guiding them, mentoring them about the dangers and those things. But we can go that route if it takes us in that direction. I just want you to understand, though, that there's a big difference between those two. So for those reasons, many times, as we develop our school police department, they're not the ones conducting these searches unless it's absolutely necessary, or if we determine through the vape sensors, which Mr. Ganesh will talk about in a few minutes, that there's something more to this product that we're seeing. And then the other piece of that is what's the protocol for these products if we find them. So they are an electronic device. We can use public disposals, so the regional recycling programs for electronic devices, things of that nature. If they're the over-the-counter, non-controlled substance type, we can dispose of them there. I can turn them over to our partners in the county public safety department. We can reach out to other partners in our community and get rid of these products. If they are of a criminal nature, if it's a controlled substance, what we do is that then could potentially become evidence for us. And if it does, then we secure that until such time it's taken before the court. And either the court then tells us to dispose of it, or we dispose of it in the appropriate fashion when we get to that point. One of the other conversations that was had recently was, should we be using dogs? Should we have dogs in our schools to check? Excuse me. For the vaping in and of themselves, the answer really is no, because that's not what the dogs are trained for. So a dog usually has one of three objectives when you bring a search dog in. It's either controlled substances, explosives, or other substances that maybe a person fled and we're looking for that, and there was a scent that they were following. Those are the three things that those dogs are designed to track: the scent, a controlled substance, or an explosive. And a vape doesn't fit that, because a vape that you buy over the counter doesn't have any of those substances in it, so we're not even going to be detecting them. The other piece about this is the courts are very clear that searches by dogs cannot be very intrusive. So we're talking about public areas of our buildings and lockers, but not specific. So if I do bring a dog in to search, or you agree to bring a dog in here to walk around and just take a look, they're only going to be in the common hallways and the common areas of our building. They're not going to be in the locker rooms. They're not going to be in a classroom. They're not going to be checking someone specifically, because it has to be an in general area search. It can't be anything that is very specific. I can't target someone like you would, let's say, a dog at a screening at an airport. That's not the purpose of having the dogs here. Only in the common areas. And again, like I said, the courts have been very specific. I spoke to Corporal Durham at the State Police Barracks in Skippack. He's the regional commander of their K-9 team, and he was very careful to tell me, he's like, we'll come if you want us to come, but we're not really going to find what you're looking for. They might have a general sense that something's going on, but being more specific is not what that's intended for. So that kind of goes over those first four questions. I'm going to ask Mr. Ganesh to step up. He's going to talk a little bit about the vape sensors that, we tested a few. He's had a few in mind. I'll let you speak to that, Mr. Ganesh.
Thank you, Chief. All right, good evening, everyone. So one of the ways to combat vaping is through the vape detector. This device is capable of detecting even very low levels of THC and chemicals and other particles that are present in vape. It'll also discreetly let the administration know of a trigger. So when this device is combined with the cameras that are placed outside the bathrooms, now we're able to determine who used that bathroom and why that alert was triggered. So we piloted this vape detector in a high school, one of the high school bathrooms for about 6 weeks, and there were many triggers. We had many events with vape involved in that, and it also led to disciplinary consequences. These are not just vape detectors. These are also environmental sensors that helps you detect the rust, noise, quality of air and stuff like that. So it's more than a vape detector. And in the recent Safety and Operations Committee meeting that we had in March, we had a detailed conversation about implementing these vape detectors in the high school. And it's our plan to bring to the board in May a proposal to implement the vape detectors throughout the high school student restrooms. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have with regards to the pilot.
So it sounds like the pilot was successful, and you mentioned the high school. Has there been any discussion about also doing it at the middle school level? Because I know that vaping is also a concern there. Maybe not to the same extent, but it is amping up there as well.
We briefly discussed, we wanted to try it at the high school first, and then we briefly discussed the middle school, but not in a detailed manner. But yes, we did have that conversation.
Mr. Ganesh?
Yes.
You indicated in your report there that the vape detector can tell the difference between THC and a more traditional, like tobacco nicotine-based product. Is that correct?
So the vape detector has two sensors in them. It has a particle sensor and a chemical sensor. So it is able to detect, it won't be able to tell a difference, but it'll be able to detect the nicotine and also the other chemicals and particles present in it.
But it doesn't discriminate then. It would just be the same type of alarm, whether it's a THC vape or nicotine.
At least the ones that we piloted did not differentiate, but there are so many other vape sensors that's available that we can look into. But the ones that we piloted did not differentiate.
Because, Mr. Miller, correct me if I'm wrong, if we were able to discriminate between what type of an alarm it is, that would cause a different response. Is that correct?
Well, it could be handled potentially differently if we detected something with THC in it, obviously, versus something that was just a traditional, nicotine-based vape. That's correct. And that's how administration handles that now. So if they believe that something contains THC, we have a field testing kit that we use, and that's typically the question that, we have through law enforcement is, have you detected it or not? And is it a trace amount or is it a sizable amount? Because then that, as you get into the court systems with something along those lines, that becomes a question as you go down the line, like, what was the quantity that you detected? So that's more testing. And sometimes the testing process, I don't mean to get too far ahead here, but the testing process financially outweighs the process we're trying to get through in some cases. So it can be several $100s to test a device, versus something that if we decide up front, maybe we're going to go a discipline route instead within the school. So lots of different ways to go.
Correct, yeah. Good. The reason I asked, because this is the first time I've heard that there was a possibility of discriminating what it is. And in my mind, every time that I heard an alarm would be sent to the response team, it wouldn't have been a differentiated one. It just would have been vaping has been detected.
That is correct.
Some of these devices their technology's outpacing our ability to get our hands on them because they're developing more and more things that are more beneficial to us as far as knowing. So the one we had was an early unit compared to what's available even today.
What's the process? A person goes to the bathroom. We have a device that's differential. Differential alarm goes off that there's THC. There's 3 people in the bathroom, though. What do you do?
Question all 3 of them.
Are we searching all 3 of them?
Typically, administration will bring all 3 down and conduct a preliminary search and see what they find to see if someone, has one that's obviously visible. Part of the directive here also says that the reasonableness of that searching shouldn't outweigh what we're talking about. So we're not talking about a body search on someone that simply has a vape that might be nicotine laced.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted, just for the record, Mr. Ganesh, I know you touched on just the sensors themselves. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe the 2 of you in collaboration can talk a little bit about the integration with the cameras and then also the notification process that will take place?
Right. So the vape itself will be integrated into our camera system. So when a vape is triggered, what happens is it either sends an email or a push notification or an app. At the same time, it can send a push notification to the camera system as well. There's a vape that's detected in a camera that's tied to that bathroom or whatnot. So that push notification or an email is going to say, hey, a vape was detected in a senior lounge, camera number 3, whatnot. So at that point, we can then go in and either look at the live footage or go back and look at to see who entered the bathroom and determine who went to the bathroom that way.
And then I'm just going to assume then that there will be ARs in place with regard to the steps that are taken. Once the alarm is triggered, then these are the things that happen. So like you said, it will trigger through the app, then somebody will respond. So I understood from the safety and operations meeting, just for those that were not the part of that committee, there were at one point so many that not all of them could be answered. So I think it's a little different now with a full implementation. It'll be like all hands on deck in that first wave. Can you talk a little bit about that conversation we had?
Yeah, sure. During the pilot, when we piloted, there's only a subset of admins and subset of security staff were involved. Not all administrators were involved. Not all security staff members were involved. Hence, we were not able to get to all the alerts. And one of the things even the administration said was like, the first day we had a ton of alerts, and then once the word spread out, the number of alerts really dialed down a lot. And one of the things the administration felt was it was at least a deterrent for somebody to go to that go and use that bathroom. And again, the administration was not able to get to all the alerts because it was not a full-fledged live project. It was just a pilot, and there's only a handful of administrators handling that project.
How quick's the alert? I mean, because you might have to you're going back to the camera to see who's in the bathroom, right? Yeah. And during the pilot, we didn't have that mechanism where it tied into the camera.
We did. So we did have a combo, a sensor in the bathroom and a camera outside. And the way that, the one day that I was there when the principal in Dr. Moss's office there was a security personnel present in that floor.
Yeah.
So when this alert triggered, so basically it's a dial of 0 to 100, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be at 0. When the vape is triggered, then it'll go to 60 or 70 at the confidence levels. Once that is triggered, Dr. Moss would radio whoever was there, and then that person would go into the bathroom and then find out there's full of smoke or whatnot, and then confiscate the device or question the student. So that's how it happened. And then I think we even confiscated a couple of vapes during that first day.
So Dr. Moss would be the one to get how does it work to make sure that whoever gets the alert that kind of triggers the next step? Because I can imagine if all the alerts go out, it's like, okay, well, who's on first as far as who then responds? How do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
Right,
there are several
that's
roles
true.
in the app that we can delegate certain vape sensors to go to certain personnel. The capability is there, but during this pilot, we were just having only one administrator, so all the alerts went to Dr. Moss. But in a full-fledged implementation, we can delegate certain sensors to go to certain team members or even Chief Miller's staff. This way, they can act based upon the triggers.
But then is there a way then to I don't know, almost like a check system, okay, once the alert has gone out to that staff member, is there a way then to put within the system, okay, that alert has been received and somebody has then responded to it?
Kind of triggering a ticketing.
It's a queue system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Triggering an action.
The camera could be because it's so instantaneous, it could be more of 11:35, bathroom 22, alarm goes off, I'm going to the camera to find out who are the students that went into the bathroom at 11:19 and left at 11:24.
It was my understanding that the app is real time though.
It is real time.
You gotta get there. They
Right,
could have,
no, I
could have
got that.
left.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, you would need to, if they leave,
But I'm
then
just
you have
saying,
to
like,
go back,
Yeah.
right? I got
Say you're set up to receive the alert, but maybe you're in
Different
a
wing.
situation with another student dealing with something, so you weren't able to respond right away, but everybody is assuming that you've responded because you get the alert.
Sure.
How is there a way to safeguard that someone has actually responded to the alert? Because whenever you have a crisis team, right, everybody on the team gets alerted, but there needs to be a way for someone to know who has actually responded to the crisis. And again, I think
this
all
is-
of this
yeah.
would be good in an AR lineup.
This is more, the way I look at it is more different than a response to a crisis because, again, because I have the camera, it's just, it went off, was a consequence given? It might take till tomorrow to get the consequence out because I might have to tell all the teachers to log into your email because we're sending you pictures of who the students are so you can tell me who they are. And then you go, hey, look, this went off. This is what
Agreed,
happened.
but still
the
a
problem
way to-
comes down to what I mentioned earlier. If there are 4 people in the bathroom and they all left out before someone came, nothing you can do the next day. So
And even still, the next day, even when you get to it the next day, there still needs to be some sort of way to be like, okay, check, we actually did follow up on it.
yeah.
Yep. So what it does is, since it's basically sends out an email, it can easily trigger a workflow. So it's basically like creating a ticket. It sends an email, say, hey, you know what, smoking, vape being detected, and then it creates something, it gets assigned to somebody, like, and then somebody acts upon it, and then say, you know what, action taken or whatever, then that item is resolved. Hence, it triggers a workflow. It goes through a process and resolves. So yes, since the platform that we demoed probably didn't have that, but that's not the platform that we're going to go with. So we're looking at another product as well. So that's something that we'll be looking into when we go to implement, to see if there's a workflow associated with the trigger.
I appreciate that. I'm just thinking, like, I mean, we're definitely getting into the weeds, and those are things that when we write in AR, but I think when you take it back and you go to safety and operations, those are the steps are going to be very important, and the follow through to make sure that nothing gets missed. Because I could see it kind of things falling through the cracks, like, oh, I thought you did that, or 3 days later. Well, now at this point, the kid doesn't have anything on them because 3 days have passed, but it got missed.
Yeah, that workflow would definitely solve that problem.
Mr. Miller, if we had the vape detectors deployed throughout the high school, is your concern more that it becomes a preventative, so that if students realize that there's vape detectors out there and our vape detection goes to single digits because of that? Is that more important to you, that we do that prevention part of that this vape system prevents? Or are we more concerned with the enforcement and going through the video cameras and that kind of thing? Because that's where I personally see the advantage of having the system, is not so much that it becomes an enforcement, but that it does what it's supposed to do in preventing an action from happening. Because I don't want to see vape detection in here become like speed detection on the Schuylkill, where everybody just goes through, and does what they
If you
know.
get the ticket, you're not going to slow down.
Yeah, I get that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but also you can then have
Both.
targeted enforcements on certain, because there's no way that they're going to be able to react to every
Correct, but it's
alarm.
got to be both.
No, I get that.
If the thing's flashing 42 and it's a 35, if I'm not getting a ticket, I'm probably still going to do 42.
Yeah.
It can flash at me all day long. It's going to prevent because students will see it, but if the students don't hear that their friends are getting consequences, it's no longer going to be something that they're worried about. So it's got to
Absolutely,
be.
and that's why I brought up the
whisper down the
Schuylkill
lane.
thing.
It's got to be both. It's got to be the bathrooms have the vape detection systems, and the consequences are being given out. Students are being suspended, detention, whatever that step process is through policy. They both have to happen, because just the vape detection for a while will be like, we can't do that, and then they'll be like, well, nothing's happening, so we can do it. So it's a mixture of both.
And that's where I think I can trust Mr. Miller as far as to find that balance on what he needs to do. And not, I'm pretty sure that you're,
Right. And
when you
that's the
initially
intent
roll
here.
it out, it's going to be one program. As you
Right.
get further down,
Yeah.
hopefully the behavior modification is what happens.
Right. And the schools that I've spoken to and the judges that are enforcing these rules are saying the same things, that we want it to be a preventative tool, but the message also needs to be on the back end that if someone does get caught and they are held accountable, and if this citation is issued to them, that is in fact followed through upon consistently, so that people understand, if I get caught, this is what's going to happen to me, and it's not going to be overlooked. So that's our look at it. Thank you, Dr. Russell.
Thank you both very much. All right, let's move on to something pretty exciting. So we have an eclipse coming on Monday, the 8th. So there'll be a letter that goes home to parents this week explaining some of the safety precautions that we need to take, in addition to some of the science that goes along with observing an eclipse. So it's been since 2017 that we've seen an eclipse in this area. It won't be a total eclipse for us. It will be a partial eclipse. And there's lots of pretty neat websites out there where you can actually observe some models of the path of the eclipse as it moves through our area. We have purchased for our students the glasses that are recommended if they're going to be observing the eclipse. What's difficult for us and for school districts in our area is the timing. It's very close to dismissal time. So we want to be careful, and we want to afford students the opportunity to have a pair of glasses as they're riding the bus home, and they may want to observe the eclipse, look at the sun. They should wear the glasses. What they shouldn't do is wear the glasses and walk looking straight ahead, because they're black. You can't see anything as you look through these. So I want to put a little note about that in the letter that I send home to parents. I don't want students to be tripping as they're walking home from school if they're wearing these glasses. So if they're not looking up at the sun and observing the eclipse, they have to be really careful with these glasses. But we did get those. Parents will also have the opportunity to pick their child up early if they so choose, or to keep their child home if that's more comfortable. The state has actually afforded us excused absences in these cases because of the eclipse. So we're excited to observe that. Science classes are excited, and we'll look forward to hearing some feedback. So a couple of recognitions, just a couple of shout outs. Ursinus College recognized 2 groups from Perkiomen Valley. We have a group of 5th grade teachers and our principal from Schwenksville there on the left for some of the work that they've done in leading their students in writing essays about the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And we had some examples of those at last month's meeting. They were also recognized at Ursinus College, as was Dr. Clune for his work on the Lenape Arboretum and Muhlenberg Woods. That was a Sycamore Community Engagement Award. And our 5th grade team received an Equity and Inclusion Award. So we appreciate the recognition, the partnership with Ursinus, and a nice shout out to some of our people for their work. So here's some information, at least that the school district has, on the Southeast Youth Development Center. We continue to learn more. Our information indicates it won't be open until July, and there will be a soft start, a maximum of 48 students, ages 14 to 21. Because there is some construction that has to happen inside, this will take place inside the women's facility. So if you happen to pull into SCI Phoenix off of 73, the women's facility that was originally developed for 200 women exists there. It was never really used except periodically during the COVID pandemic. That will be the school for these young men. They are scheduled to be placed beginning in July. It will be a soft start because of this construction happening internally. They need to expand the learning space for our students that'll be there. There is state funding that's been allocated to our district. We are the LEA. We are responsible for educational programming. And there are some other opportunities to recoup costs under the law, under Section 1306, if you're interested in more information about that. At any rate, the district is obligated at this point to complete an online grant, which isn't unusual for us. We do that for other monies that the state provides us. We fill out an online grant application, it gets submitted. What's important with this information in this grant are the terms and the agreement of the funding. So that's coming up very soon. I have recommended to our board, if you've read the agenda, that the board consider contracting the educational programming to the MCIU. That appears on the agenda as a motion this evening so that they can get started. They're used to doing this work, and they have some good experience doing this sort of work, working with students who are challenged in this way. And we have a strong partnership with them and are looking forward to working with them in this endeavor. We would receive the money from the state, and we would pay the IU for its services, just as we do with special ed services in some cases. There are other relationships or arrangements that exist in that way. We are not only interested in the academic experiences being offered these students to get them on that path towards earning a diploma, but also some vocational technical learning. And there are opportunities for that that we're exploring a little bit further with MCIU as we consider what might be possible. Somebody had asked me if the students were going to be housed with the adults. They are absolutely not going to be housed with the adults. They are in separate locations. Another question was, why can't the students be educated by the teachers that are there for the adults? Because under the law, that does not work to qualify a student to earn a diploma. We need specialized or certified individuals to be delivering the instruction for the students. So there will not be any overlap in that area. That's an important question and clarification to provide. Stay tuned. We continue to, I try to keep the board up to date. The information is coming in little bits at a time. But time is marching on, so I appreciate the board's consideration of the agenda item tonight so that if approved, the MCIU can get started with that staffing and hiring their staff to provide the educational programming here. In other staffing updates, I just want to bring you up to date. We went through another round of school police officer search, if you will, for number 7 of 7. And we believe that we may have a recommended candidate for the board in May. There's a process. Our school police officer candidates have to move through training before they can be board approved. There are different background checks and approvals that look different for them from professional staff or paraprofessional staff or support staff. So, but we feel pretty good about the outcome of this latest round of interviews and appreciate those that have participated in these interviews. It's been a rigorous process for our candidates. They have moved through 4 stations in this round: a station of students, a station of teachers, a station of administrators, and a station of parents. And they have faced questions in each of those rounds. And they did a nice job. Week before break or so. We're also embarking upon that search for an assistant to the superintendent. Since we did not fill the assistant superintendent, the posting closes this Friday, and we will conduct a paper screening, and then first round interviews are scheduled sometime this month yet. I don't have the exact date here. Second round interviews also should fall in April with a recommended candidate, we hope, on the May board agenda. So stay tuned for that. Staffing updates there. And spring has sprung. There's been a lot of rain, very little sun, but with spring and some of the really fun events for our students and the activities outdoors comes those spring assessments. Unfortunately, they begin this month for our students in grades 3 through 8. The PSSAs will start on the 22nd of April. Keystones, middle of May. APs overlap. So we have lots of high school students taking advanced placement exams. They will begin, they're very date specific, established by the College Board. They start in April and then they continue into May. So that is heavy for our students, along with some of the really fun things and nice activities of spring. But we believe we have them prepared and wish them well. And with that, that ends my report.
Dr. Russell, thank you so much. Mr. Suber's solicitor's report.
I have no report.
Okay, 2.05, board and district committee reports. Does anyone have anything to add from any of the committee meetings that we've had since our last meeting? Okey-dokey.
Just wanted to
Yeah, go ahead.
ask a question. I know we talked about at the last board meeting the high school gymnasium, and that would be talked about safety and ops. Well, what's the update on that?
Mr. Weaver and Mr. Fabrizio had put together a revised, what's the word? Thank you, I'm sorry, my mind went blank. Priority list was the word that I was trying to priority. And that was placed within the top 10 or whatever of the priority list. So I don't know if you have an update for us about that tonight, but that it was discussed, and it was discussed that it should move forward.
I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, we continue to work on that list. It did show up in the top 30, and as I shared before.
Top 30 was what we presented, right, correct.
Mr.
Right.
Fabrizio did a great job of identifying by building, then adding them all together, then went global, and then we pared it down. So that's what we presented then, like it was a top 10, but it actually was 16 items,
Right.
because the first 7 were all life safety
Right.
items that Mr. Fabrizio and our group had agreed were items of priority.
Were you able to open that and see that?
Yeah, I
the way
did see
it
that,
was?
but at the meeting, we didn't have costs for what the floor would cost or the stanchions. Do we know what that would cost yet?
So I understood that I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Fabrizio, that he did have bids for those things, and you were aware of those costs. So I think what Mr. Saylor is looking for is the go date.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll need to expect, if we could have,
You think it'd be something that would be completed prior to the next school year?
the vendor.
I would venture to say at this point in time, it's April. I don't think so, Mr. Fabrizio. I mean, we'd have to go through a whole procurement process and everything like that. Even if it was CoStars, we're way behind the schedule to get things scheduled for the summer.
So I think from Mr. Saylor, what are we needing to do from the board's perspective to move this item forward to put a date on the calendar?
For which one of the projects?
You're looking at the gymnasium
so-
as the floor and the,
Yeah, I'm trying to get an understanding. So will the gymnasium in the high school be updated and modified? It sounds like it won't be modified during the 25 school year. Will it be modified by the 26 school year?
So we can put it in the queue for the summer of 2025. That's what I would say as of right now, pending any further information from Mr. Fabrizio.
Okay.
or sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different what we talked about when we voted for the Evergreen gymnasium, but okay.
Well, that was a different vendor, though, different materials.
I know.
So, Mr. Fabrizio, if you could come back to us maybe next week with an answer from the vendors for the items for the high school competition gym, and then that way we could at least have an idea as to when that would be. Is that fair? You have 1 week. Call them now. He's got it. Thumbs up. We got a thumbs up. All right. Was that all your questions about safety and ops? What else did we
Can
have?
I
this-
one
ahead.
follow-up on that? Do we want to do just the floor bid or the floor and the bleacher? I'm not going up this
If
time.
you say
just
roof,
the
if you
bleachers.
say
Nope,
roof,
I'm not saying it.
I'm
I'm just saying
leaving.
something to sit on, the bleachers, because wouldn't that, or was this going to be parsed out as its own project of just the floor?
So it's multiple vendors. So Mr. Fabrizio has 1 week to get answers and dates from all of the vendors that he's been in contact with regards to the materials. Is that fair? And we'll revisit it.
That's fine.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
And
we're
then you
all
can
on-
decide then at that point.
I don't get
Mr.
to
Saylor wants it
decide.
done next month. No pressure.
Not Mr. Saylor.
Oh, I'm sorry, not Mr. Saylor. He's just,
The interesting part of that conversation is that the ceiling was, is not a part and parcel of the project at this point in time.
understood. Understood on that. That was a separate number. So, first things first. Because the ceiling is not, it's aesthetic, it's not a safety issue. Okay. Moving on. We're gonna, go ahead, Mr.
I have
Brown.
another update from the standpoint of the
Oh, thank you.
North Monco Technical Career Center. As of the last meeting, Dr. Beth Ann Haas has been appointed as the administrative director effective July the 1st, and Stephen Monastra has been appointed as the assistant director effective on that same day. So they now have new leadership that's coming up that has been tried and true and has been there for quite some time. So,
Thank you.
bit of good news.
So, to that point, so I know it's a bunch of schools that work together, but the big elephant in the room is we need more of them. Not more. The building needs to get bigger. And I know that's talked about a lot at meetings. I know that was talked about, I think, 2 months ago. North Monco's almost, not sold out, but they're at capacity, and the other one, the other local one, yeah, they're at capacity. Or is that something that when the superintendents get together every once in a while, is that a conversation piece that happens? I know it's really dependent on the school districts to assist with that, because we fund that, but North Monco is at capacity, and it's preventing students from fulfilling their post-high school career. And I know from talking to an administrator at another facility 10 years ago, they had like 500 students, and now they have the student base has grown exponentially.
Demand is there, yeah.
You know, as our student base goes this way, their student base is going the exact opposite. What can be done over the next, do they go through a comprehensive building plan similar to yes, they do? Are there things on the horizon that all the school districts that can work together on to figure out ways to maybe creating a secondary building? Or I know they were talking about building in that back grass area, but they're at the point where they're sold out.
It's a shame because there's a lot of programs that kids can't get in because there's not enough room, and they're getting turned away.
The one thing that they had talked about, and this is a constant kind of a thing, that they go back and forth over programs that are available to see just how competitive that program is for the workforce. And so they are making changes and modifications and remodeling various different programs to make sure that they can include some of those that were on the wait list. The wait list is much smaller now than it was at this point in time last year.
Why is that?
So, because of different programs that were put in and different ways, there's a lot of turnover during this time where students will sign up for it, but then they'll change their mind, or they'll decide that they want to go into a different shop. Or if they've asked for this shop, but in the same cluster, there's another shop that has a space available, sometimes they'll slide into that one instead. So the idea of space has been a a constant battle ever since I've been on the JOC. They're trying to figure out where they can go. There's no more area in the footprint that they can add outside, so now they're looking to see if there's a way of possibly adding up. So there's questions that come up pretty much every meeting as far as what is the best way that we can start to expand it. The student population, I don't remember right now what they said that it was, but it is large. It's larger than you would expect it to be.
The students aren't churning out because they're like, well, I'm on a wait list, never mind, I guess this isn't for me.
Usually if they want to go, if they're not able to get in, because a lot of programs too are, you can go in as a 9th grader, you can go as a 10th grader, you can go in as an 11th grader. So even though they may not be able to get into their first choice in their first year, it is possible that they may be able to slip into it. It's very much like the same kind of thing as scheduling at the high school. You don't know.
They'd be able to get more out of their space if there wasn't the transfer back and forth and it was just full day.
There is a component that is full day. It's the PIAP program.
That's the only one?
The PIAP program, there are some, I know that we used to have some that were full day, but that's limited. Oftentimes those were students that were in the cosmetology just in order to make sure that they had enough hours to get their license.
West Monco is full day, and they're still bursting at the seams.
They're still, are they?
I think the challenge too, and Dr. Dietrich can probably speak to why they can't expand in the footprint. I don't know if you want to share.
Let them build up, man. Let them go upwards.
They could go upwards. It's a complicated issue, and one of the factors that I know that I had when I was superintendent of record there before retiring was to challenge the administration to look at the delivery pattern that's being utilized. Because you have different arrival times from different school districts. There's a time period in there where 9th graders are there for certain school districts but not for others. And then you, of course, you have to afford the faculty time for lunch. But there's a time period during the early part of the day there before lunch where the actual number of students interacting with the staff is not nearly the same number as at other times. You have to look at your afternoon program and say, you know, where are we with our 11th and 12th graders? How many are going out in co-op? Is there anything else we could be doing there? Is there some flexibility with the fact that North Penn High School is so close that perhaps that district has some students that are in the maybe 11th grade that are there at a different time than what we have right now? So there are a lot of complex issues. But, you know, expanding the footprint is one of the considerations. But I know I, as one, was very concerned that we had exhausted all other possibilities because expanding the footprint is complicated. There's impervious surface concerns. You're right adjacent to the high school. The high school already has impervious surface concerns. So it's not a simple solution.
I will say that this year, the team has worked diligently, and by team I mean Mrs. Partovich, Dr. Haas, and Mr. Monastra, to increase capacity. So they took space almost in a closet there where the school security and police officers participate in their learning, and they expanded it to provide programs that they believe will lead to jobs for students in the health sciences. So they're taking steps like that to try and be more efficient and be more purposeful for the students. But the waiting list is about 180 students, so you're right. Something else needs to happen to continue to enhance that capacity and increase it.
So we could go on, but there are a lot of issues to tackle, and I'm confident the administration is tackling them. I look forward to the new leadership there also to tackle these issues. But another one just came to mind too is of the programs offered there, and Mr. Fountain had alluded to that, but of the programs that are offered there, do they all have to be offered at the vocational technical school, or are any of those like an internet technologies course? Real estate's valuable. So is that classroom best used for internet technologies? Or could each of the districts that chose to offer some sort of
Outside of the
appropriate
box
program
solutions,
here,
right.
you know, at the sending school, and we could use that particular lab for a different purpose?
That is one of the things too that they talked about, or that we've talked about multiple times, because they do a study every year to see which shops are actually fully utilized and which ones are on the way sort of out, that are now being offered in most of the sending schools. So what they've done at this point, that's how they choose which ones will be cut and which ones will be added in, so that we're constantly looking to make sure that we've got things that are going to be competitive in the job market and have kids that are going to be prepared to go into it.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful and comprehensive. I appreciate that. Okay, if there's nothing else, new meetings for this month are listed, and we will move on to the consent agenda 3.01. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? A motion, is there a second? Oh, we're just building it, yes, next week, right? Okay. Promise next month, it's gonna be like, got it, fabulous. 4.01, that's education, Dr. Campley. Oh, come on. Education Committee of the Whole. Dr. Campley will get it next. Go ahead, Dr. Dietrich.
All right, this evening we
wait,
have
am
a
I?
middle
Oh,
school
okay.
schedule. We have an update from the curriculum department. We have some discussion regarding full-day kindergarten and the enrollment and staffing updates. So let's lead off with the middle school schedule. We do have 7 administrators this evening that are going to present, and they're going to make their way towards the platform here to present. And we do have some slides. 5 through 11 are all slides that we had shared previously. So we're not going to read through those or discuss those in detail here again this evening, but they are there for your reference and the reference of the community as we just go through those quickly. But very importantly, we could go to slide 12 then. That is the new slide for tonight to kick us off. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Creedon and Dr. Clune on why the change.
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich. And I'm very loud. All right, so why the change? We have been going through and working towards a schedule like this as we have navigated things throughout the past couple years to a few years, even going back to when things were very different a few years ago. So the important parts of this, what we've come to learn, some of the biggest things is there isn't one intervention that we can provide to everybody and think that it's going to work, equitably for all. What we want to do is meet each individual student's needs where they're at and provide those levels and tiers of intervention at those levels that they need. So that's something that is important, and what this schedule provides is opportunities to have our staff, our educators, our experts, our support personnel be able to provide those different levels at where they need. The other things that are highlighted in here when it comes to the top section is we don't want to require students to have to choose between two things that they would prefer. And this schedule would provide us an opportunity to alleviate some of those choices and allow them to participate in all those things they would like to participate in. And also at the same time providing them that level of tiered intervention that they need. So some of the things that are brought up here is the competing between the intervention and the music. And sometimes it's not even just the students who have that lower academic need. It's the students that even have that higher academic need, because sometimes when they're participating in music, the only times they can really participate in or in that advisory period and do the things that they want to do as far as stay organized, as far as work on some of that difficult work that they have, outside of those music periods are the times that right now we have that intervention time happening, which they're not able to do. So it's on both levels, you know, and so, you know, this schedule will help alleviate those things and provide some of that. Even the gifted scheduling will benefit tremendously, because right now our gifted students are being pulled from either a core academic class, or a special class that some of them would not prefer to be pulled from. However, there is a lack of choices in the matter. So that's another thing that would help. And then comes not supporting the improved behaviors. There's plenty of research and evidence out there that a character education curriculum would help benefit from, you know, helping from the start and working on making sure we're doing what we can to inform, to educate, to improve before certain behaviors eventually start, before behaviors happen, and not basically reacting so often. A lot of times what we do, I mean, and we do this, and we work on doing it very well, is when we have to respond to bad behaviors and give consequences, we're restorative during those consequences, which is helpful. But sometimes we find ourselves in those restorative consequences having to repeat ourselves over and over and over again. And we feel like if we're starting to say a lot of the same things to students in a reactive way, sometimes you have to think about it proactively and start doing it in more of a character education type curriculum manner, and in a mode that will allow, you know, students, a more widespread amount of students, to get that in a proactive way instead of a reactive way. So a couple other things that are mentioned in here when it comes to not only character education, but morning meetings, starting days off with a check-in, and allowing those to get days started in a way that is motivating, supportive, and encouraging, as, you know, especially when we come back on after a long break on a rainy Tuesday, and you know, we need to make sure we're checking in and getting spirits up and doing what we can to help motivate before a lot of those academic and rigorous times take place.
So this is going to be just a sample schedule. Couple of changes that you noticed we've talked about. Homeroom, we're going to expand that to 10 minutes, allow us to do these morning meetings. Regular class core periods are going to move from 52 minutes to 48 minutes. We are now going to have an I&E time, which is 30 minutes. It's going to follow, or be before lunch. Lunch will follow I&E time, and it's going to be different for each grade level. Okay, so they'll have their own time. That'll help us maximize our staff and actually be able to really be flexible in terms of when we can provide I&E time. And then advisory is going to go from 52 minutes to 42 minutes. What you see in front of you is just kind of a sample 6th grade schedule. If you go to the next slide, kind of showing you the difference between two. This is going to show you all 3 grade levels on the same slide, and you could see how progressively the I&E time moves between each grade level. It includes time just before lunch. It's going to be like a real power hour, right? You're going to get that 30 minutes opportunity for I&E, and then you're going to go right to lunch, and then you can continue on with your regular class periods. And across the board, you see in the beginning there, at the start of the day, we're going to have our morning meetings. And then at the end, traditionally, we're going to have our advisory time, which is, you know, an opportunity for doing a lot of work for students to be able to not only go to band, orchestra, chorus, to also be able to get opportunities to meet with the librarian, to go down to tech ed, to be able to work with their classroom teachers and to get advisory, right? To be able to set goal setting, have conversations with their team teachers. These are times that we think we're going to be able to better utilize by pulling out the intervention or the intensification in the enrichment time. And if you go to the next slide, this talks a lot about the morning meetings. And let me just say this, we're really excited about morning meetings. There's a lot of research. I should also point out that the Association for Middle Level Education, their latest book is on advisory, and that all of the principals at the middle level, as well as some of our other teachers, attended the statewide conference on middle level education. We all attended actually a particular workshop on morning meetings. We talked with other middle schools that are best practice implementing morning meetings. There's a lot of research around students being able to improve their academics because they're feeling like they belong, they're feeling like we're improving their communication skills, they're starting off their day in a positive way, they're connecting with their teachers, and it's really important, building these relationships. Part of the reason why we encourage our teachers to greet every student by name when they're coming to their classroom is research tells us that just that alone builds relationships and helps students do better academically in the class. Research is showing us by actually having a positive start every day with a morning meeting that's going to have students introducing, greeting each other, having a short activity and a question that they're going to work on is going to be a real positive start. We're excited that we're also including our special area teachers with our homeroom teachers. There's actually going to be 2 teachers in the room. It'll give our special area teachers an opportunity to build a close relationship with one particular class, because they see a lot of kids throughout the day. This is going to give them a chance to kind of build those relationships. And we have, because of some of our conferences that we've attended and some of our research, we have a lot of material to work with. We're excited that we've already started an advisory morning meeting committee with teachers that we're already looking at how we want to map out what's going to be happening. Should also point out that intervention time, I&E time, which is 30 minutes, it's broken out into 3 parts. 2 of the cycle, students are going to get core academic class rotation, okay, during 4 of the 6 days. 2 of the 6 days are going to be focused on character education. Of the 4 days, students can also be pulled out for intervention time. And it's just so important that we have a select time where we can maximize our reading specialist, our MTSS coordinator, our math intervention, and gifted students. You know, Mr. Creedon pointed out at the beginning here, equity. When middle school students have to choose, we lose. We all lose. The student loses, the teachers lose. When they have to decide between 2 classes that they're supposed to attend, that is not a good spot to put a student in. This actually helps alleviate that for gifted students. It gives them a secure time during the school day where they can attend their gifted seminar and have nothing that's going to interfere with them actually being able to attend their regular academic core classes, as well as be able to incorporate some of this character education that we're looking forward to incorporating throughout our school day. And those are some real key differences so far. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just start off by saying a lot of advantages that we see to this new schedule. Beyond the increased homework time that I've already mentioned, listen, the idea of not being pulled out of core classes, we can't have that anymore. Uninterrupted I&E time, flexibility to meet the needs of students. Our counselors will be able to run groups during this I&E time. We're going to be able to provide more individual support for students. It's a framework that allows us to individualize what we're doing for students, and we need that framework. And we need it in our schedule. Our schedule drives so much of what we're doing, and I so appreciate just your support in this process. And we're looking forward to some really great things. Mr. Creed wants to share a few other things.
Yeah, just going back to the previous slide real quick, something that continues to come up is, you know, why can't we continue doing this during advisory? There are so many things and more things as years go on competing with that advisory time. We have different things going on in our libraries. We have certain teachers that may do certain clubs during that time. We have, again, we mentioned music. We mentioned, even though gifted students might be utilizing or maximizing this time during the I&E, there's going to be a need to maybe do some of that time as well, share some of that time with advisory. So there's so many other things competing with that time. This will provide that uninterrupted time, and also provide opportunities to fill those the MTSS tiered supports with items and different levels of supports at each tier that we get excited about. There are some schools that don't have a lot of those different types of options and supports in those different tiers, and this provides more of those options, which is helpful. PBIS is something that is very strong at East, and we are kicking off. We're very excited to be kicking off at West, and we've been building up to that and getting very excited about that in the fall. And with PBIS being another thing that we're also doing and creating that positive environment, positive culture, that we're also very excited about. It's going to provide opportunities for us to not only teach lessons, we're creating videos to show kids. All that will continue to be incorporated in that character education component, and shared shared at that time as well. All right. So the structured literacy audit, we ended up concluding the West part of the audit before spring break. I know East was a little bit before that, but there were a lot of great things learned. I know one thing I enjoyed the most was even getting into so many classrooms, all in 2 days, which was busy, but extremely valuable. But a couple of things we learned from those audits and things that were shared with us. I remember a conversation with the gentleman that was doing our audit, and what he said was the middle level is a prime time and opportunity to be doing more intensive interventions before they reach the high school level. And what they recommend is 45 minutes to an hour a day. We're certainly not proposing that, but just with what he was sharing with us, they were also excited that we were thinking towards doing something at least daily, even if it's a half an hour, it's gonna be something that we can maximize and utilize to make sure that we're providing regular intervention. It needs to be done with fidelity in order to make sure gaps are closed, in order to make sure we're making up grade levels in certain learnings and subject areas, and reading levels and things like that. A lot of that has to be done with regularity and with an intensification that is very important. So it's something that we're going to take. We're going to take, if we get this half an hour, we're going to take that half an hour and make sure we maximize it to the best of our ability, so that these students are going to be that much more prepared when they reach that high school level. So all those things that we're excited about, and was also a lot of those things were also echoed in the literacy audit as well.
I just want to, for the benefit of some of the board members who weren't around in the fall when we were awarded this pilot grant, I just want to clarify, give you some background. The structured literacy audit comes from a structured literacy grant that Senator Katie Muth secured for districts in her Senate District 44. We were one of those districts. So we were awarded a significant amount of money to focus on what we need to do to be providing early literacy skill development in a way that aligns to the research around science of reading and structured literacy. So this audit was conducted with some of the funding that was received as part of that grant. Each of our 7 buildings went through an audit process and learned about the strengths and the needs in the areas of literacy and ELA, English Language Arts. So just to add a little bit more context to that. But they supported this idea of an intervention period at the middle level. That will really benefit our students. So that's why it's called out in the slide.
The timing was also perfect because they were also able to recommend some resources for the reading intervention side that we are continuing to learn about. We are well versed on the math side because we've been doing that for the entirety of this year, and that we're ahead in that area. But what they recommended were 2 resources that we are actually currently learning about and meeting about with the representatives within the coming weeks. So that was also helpful.
I have some questions. So if we go back to slide 15, I was most pressed on the research project by Mizzou University and wanted to focus on the NEE regulator scores and wanting to know how we would adopt these types of NPS ratings or customer experience ratings into the education system. I found that their application, which is a network for educator effectiveness, and what they were talking about in this process to create your TSAs, your student-teacher relationship process scores, where you have students ranking, not ranking, but rating teachers on an elongated score, teachers ranking presentations on scores, and principals being in buildings rating those scores as well. Is that something we're going to adopt?
We're not looking at incorporating that component. When we're talking about the morning meetings, there's three parts to it. There's essentially a greeting in the morning, there's a message, and then there's an activity that we're going to do. There is other research that we can share that establishes the need for students to be able to build a sense of community, self-efficacy, communication, being able to incorporate students' sense of belonging with other students. I'd have to get back with you in terms of...
So that's everything, that student success positive relationship, that's the whole NEE. So we're not doing that at all?
No, I'd have to get back with you about the particular components that you're talking about there. We're not discussing a rating scale or anything like that, Mr. Saylor.
So what part of... So my whole capture was focused on that one point in the slide because it talks about what I think is a great program to make this an effective program. What part of the Mizzou study are we taking then? And if we're not taking anything, that's perfectly fine too.
The parts of the study in terms of positive relationships, we were looking at, I think it broke down 3 different components, and there's a component that's specifically focused on the morning meeting part. And that was the part of the study that we were applying to this particular slide because we're talking about the morning meetings.
Got it.
But I will say this, we are absolutely spending a lot of time looking at research, we're looking at approaches, and we're looking at ways that we can come up with the best practices and the best program possible. So I'm not closing the doors on anything, I'm just telling you at the moment, what I'm presenting to you is some of those components we have not actually talked about actualizing.
So the key takeaway from that research project with the morning meeting is creating the NPS style grading system to make sure the meeting is successful. And so I think it's great. I think the research project was great. I spent the weekend reading it and going over everything that NE had to offer. I don't know how you have how do you create your success without knowing your actionable item to that success? That's what the research project talked about, creating those elongated scores for teachers and students to make sure that our morning meetings are being successful. Otherwise, we're just doing them to do it, and we're not knowing the impact that we're having.
So, Mr. Saylor, that hyperlink, I don't know if you can click onto it, Barb.
That hyperlink takes you to an article which talks about the Mizzou study. Then you can download the Mizzou study and
I understand what you're saying, but I think if I'm hearing correctly, what Dr. Clune is pointing out is that they were basing the findings of that study. That's the research that they're citing is the article, right?
Yeah.
Not the actual study itself. And that's what I'm hearing.
So the study talks about the NEE rankings.
No, I understand that part, but I guess my takeaway would be after 1 year of implementation, I think at that point it would be prudent that then have student engagement to understand what worked and what didn't. And I think they did a similar thing, for example, with Freckle. I always go back to Freckle. But you have to have it be implemented for a certain amount of time. You can't, like for example, at the end of a college class, you got the survey for the teacher of the class that you've just taken, right? And the teachers take the feedback for that, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I would, to me, have that be part of the implementation of this particular schedule, but when I was reading the article, without doing the deep dive like you always do on the actual research, because that's your jam, is the research part of it, is the understanding that, like I looked at this, positive teacher-student relationships lead to better teaching. And so to me, that takeaway isn't enough to, like, let's try this out, let's do something different. So I don't know if that's a different perspective, but I understand what you're saying, like, let's poll it and find out if it worked, but first we have to do it, right? I mean, I don't know. Is that, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what your thought process was?
Exactly right. So what we're looking at here is we do have a program that we'd like to set up, and we are looking at different ways to assess. And we certainly like this particular article, which is why we included it in here. But I do not have an actual plan laid out, at the end of this for rating it yet. What we're currently looking at is research that tells us that we need to get started, and we need to actually implement certain key components, which have to do with self-efficacy, school climate, or classroom climate, students building healthier relationships, helping students actually have a sense of belonging in the classroom.
I think one of the things you're going to notice over time is, in general, as you implement these things, big picture is you should see other things that were issues start to decrease, and you'll see the parallel, and you'll start to notice that there is correlation. One of the other things I would point out is that morning meetings is not, that's, while it will be new to middle school teachers to undergo and to implement, students are not going to feel it as new. Students are getting morning meetings as part of the standard right now in elementary school. I think the breakdown is that when they get to middle school, it kind of falls away, which is when they need it, because actually now at this point they're merging schools, and the relationships now are all brand new, and there's nothing to help cultivate all of those new relationships, and now it's just a free-for-all. So I actually think that the morning meeting is a great way to build those relationships and to mold and bring together the fact that we have all of these students from different buildings who don't necessarily know one another, and they are trying to find where their pecking order is. And right now, the way it's happening is they're just figuring it out on their own, and they're not figuring it out well, and it's a mess. And I'm speaking having 2 sixth graders and watching it go down. So I think for them, morning meeting, they're familiar with it. They know it works. They find a way to work through things together as things come up. Morning meeting is also a way to have restorative conversations if something does happen within the class throughout the day. And because they already have the relationships, it's a comfortable place and a safe place for some of those conversations to happen. And when you start having those conversations, again, you see the correlation with behavior in general start to happen. So I think it may feel new when we talk about it at the middle school level, but it's not really new. I think it's actually imperative when you consider the fact that we are blending a bunch of hormonal teenagers, preteens together that have never been together and just letting them loose. I think it's great.
I will say, I'm sorry, Dr. Clune, to cut you off.
I was going to say, we're also excited about the research that tells us that emotional intelligence is correlated with academic achievement, and that, as you pointed out, you're going to see an increase actually in academic achievement because students are going to feel more comfortable around students and actually going to participate more. We know one of our areas is dialogue in the classroom, and there's a lot of research that says morning meetings will help improve communication skills and help students actually be more comfortable answering questions in class and participating. And it just really cuts across just so many areas that we're trying to improve upon.
I mean, what I was going to say with regard to what Dr. Campley had mentioned about morning meetings being familiar, I understand that with the schedule shift that it is codifying this designated time for morning meeting, but since given the fact that I'm almost, halfway through, or I am halfway, I think the countdown's 46 days, I heard today. For the rest of the year, the countdown started today.
I haven't heard a number yet, but
yeah, that's the number I heard from Mr. Murphy's room. So I will say, though, given the fact that that is happening, I think, in a large part during homeroom with community building already. I think that teachers are innately doing this to build and foster community within, their homerooms and with their teams, among the 4 core teachers. That's been the experience that I've been witness to at West, certainly. And I would imagine that our teachers at East are doing the same thing. So now that there's designated time, I think it's just, it reserves it and gives permission to really focus, like you said, on certain activities that maybe you wouldn't have time to do other than that. But yeah.
Yeah, building that sense of empathy is so huge, and getting them to cross cultural bounds when it comes to just learning about each other and knowing about each other. And the more they can learn and know, the more they can become familiar and comfortable. And that all just
This is a good time for
says
you
a
to
lot
say
of
your
good things.
saying.
Oh my gosh.
Be curious.
Oh, be curious, not judgmental. Yeah, it's a saying we have going on at West this year. We're working very hard on it.
I just wanted to
Thanks,
say, I really appreciate the intentionality of this, and I have to agree with Dr. Campley. I'm eager to see, after you implement this for some time, the decrease in bullying, the
Yeah,
decrease
so are we.
in conflict, children not being able to handle conflict, because I think that relationship building, not only teacher to student, but student to student, is vitally important, particularly at the middle school. And when anxiety is at its highest, learning is at its lowest. So if we can decrease the level of anxiety and nervousness and uncomfortableness that children experience when they're in school, we know that their learning will increase. So I find the morning meeting as a way to really alleviate that anxiety and stress for children. But I just really love the intentionality of it and the evidence-based research that aligns with it. So I'm just really curious to see the results next year after everything rolls out.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our presentation.
Is there ability for comments or questions? Excuse me, I don't know how that works. Sorry, I might be out of.
Yeah, Doctor, this is your section, so if you want to go and facilitate the.
I
Yep.
can do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, if there's comments from the audience
I just actually had a question.
or question.
So I guess.
Just so it's heard, Mr. Ganesh, do you have a mic there? A free mic? There you go. We get a lot of feedback that you can't hear on the, thank you, Mrs. Dorr.
I was just curious, it does sound good on the surface. I'm just wondering what those activities are. You're adding 4 minutes to the morning meeting. It looks like 6 to 10. So just, from the parents' perspective, what do those activities look like? Where are you creating? Is each teacher creating their own? Are you drawing from some sort of resource? I'm sure the parents in the community would like to know.
I hate to put my back to you while I'm answering your question. So no, I got the mic here, just the way it's set up. So I can give you a couple of examples. Just to give some examples of what it looks like, there's a normal greeting in the remember, it's 10 minutes. So there's a greeting. We mentioned before about research that says when teachers greet students coming in the door, there's research that says that it helps improve academic performance. There's also additional research that says when students greet each other and get to know each other every single day, it actually lowers anxiety, improves their sense of wellness. Then we have an actual message. It's going to be something along the lines of I'll give you an example, make a shift Monday. And we'll talk about change. What's the greatest change that you've had to deal with? Or top of the world Tuesday. And we could talk about what's your greatest accomplishment? And again, these are questions that offer students an opportunity for everybody to engage in just an opening discussion, right? An opportunity to really put together a conversation, and then some sort of activity. Middle school kids, we like to get them up, we like to get them moving around. We want to see them actually engaging in some sort of physical activity to get their morning started. We do have, from this conference that we attended at, and there's a couple of websites, there are lots of examples and actually days mapped out. We are having, as I mentioned earlier, a committee of teachers and administrators that are working specifically on advisory and morning meetings. We're actually planning to map out every single day of the school year before the school year starts, and we actually want to have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade mapped out because some activities are going to fit better with 6th grade, then other ones are going to fit better for 8th grade. And so we actually have years worth of material and new stuff every day because there's actually some websites that actually will put on your phone a new activity every day. And so some of our teachers have already started logging into that, and they're like, wow, this is really kind of cool. This activity goes along with whatever topic we've been doing. We actually practice some of these at the conference. So there's a number of things that we're looking at, and we're hoping that every day it's just going to be a super positive start for everybody, and the students are going to really feel more connected to their teachers, and they're going to feel more connected to their peers, and that's just going to, just in general, help improve the school climate.
So I guess I just would assume, based on what you just said, that this would be something, if it was maybe, there could be a theme, like Spirit Weeks now, obviously, are part of your newsletters, but also, you know, bell ringers, for example, those are all in Google Classroom. So the day-to-day curriculum of what everybody does and talks about in their classroom during the day, that's all in Google Classroom to begin with, but then there may be also communication that goes out. You know, this week, like you said, you just gave 2 off the top of your head, but like if it's whatever, Spirit Week, maybe that's the week everybody collectively in the building focuses on certain sections.
Right, they might have the same
You know,
ones.
obviously September is different than March, which is different than May, right?
Yep.
So, but I would assume that the communication would go out about topics and,
Yeah,
you know.
we would definitely share them out.
Because
and they can be
ideally, you
included.
would want those kids to go home then and have the conversations with their parents.
We actually consider it us partnering with parents. It's obviously we're just sharing what's happening in the classroom. And actually, we find with middle school students, when school and home are just communicating and we're in alignment, it really helps the experience. There's a lot of change. I know I said before, they go from needing a babysitter to being the babysitter in 3 short years, and that's a lot of change that's happening for these kids, and they need a lot of support. So we look forward to partnering with parents in this, as we do in all things.
Anyone else from the audience?
Dr. Campley, I just want to mention, maybe before Dr. Dietrich takes over again, I just want to extend thanks and appreciation to the team. They've dedicated a lot of time and energy to move this schedule forward. Dr. Clune, Mrs. Naden, who is the assistant there at East, Mr. Creedon, Mrs. Capriati, she's not here tonight, and some of our curriculum team members, Mrs. Jamie O'Sullivan, Mrs. Natalie Harenko, and Dr. Amy Sachs. And they've worked diligently with teachers as well as a team of administrators and stakeholders to really try and get this schedule to where it is. So I appreciate the efforts. Thank you all. And they're here tonight. They're just quietly in the back. But your efforts and the work together, the collaborative effort, really very much appreciated. Thank you.
They really hung you guys out to dry, though, right? They sent you up.
All right. With that, we're going to then move to the curriculum update. It's April, and as we typically do in April in PV, we have a curriculum update. Mrs. O'Sullivan will lead this discussion. Before you get too concerned, because there's a lot of information on all of these slides, we don't intend to go to the detail of, talking about every individual item on these, but we have them there for your review, and Mrs. O'Sullivan will give you an overview. So, Mrs. O'Sullivan.
Good evening. We didn't leave them totally hung out to dry. I'm right here, so here we are. So I'm pleased to talk to you tonight a little bit about our curriculum review cycle and the current areas under curriculum review, as well as upcoming areas for review. So it has been past practice here at PV for us to engage in a 6-year curriculum review cycle. The first year really focuses on stage 1. So we look at our data, we pull teams together, we talk about a scope and sequence. We look at current best practices in what that area is. We then talk about resource selections, what resources are out there that we might be willing to adopt, both in open education resources as well as paid resources. And then we come to the board in the spring. This is like our time to shine, where we then present our stage 1 curriculum documents. The work then continues in year 2. So in year 2, we focus on stages 2 and 3, which are really our common assessments as well as our learning plan. Those things are happening during year 1, but we finalize them during year 2 when we begin to implement and we see what's working, what needs to be shifted, and we work to finalize the assessments and the learning plan with the teachers. In the monitor stage, which is years 3 through 5, we really work to implement the curriculum as written, and we continue to revise those stages 2 and 3. Stage 1 remains board approved, and that's kind of where we focus. We then go back in year 6 and begin the process all over again. So that's our curriculum cycle. We then engage in professional development. You can see that ring around the outside. We're always engaging our teachers in professional development around their areas. So with that, we have some curriculum that will be presented to you over the next 2 months. We're not presenting anything tonight, but all of these areas will be presented either in May or June, and they'll then sit for 30 days for public review and will be approved in the following month. So you can see there, we have some areas for humanities as well as areas for STEM. This is the stage 1 board approval part. So once the stage 1 is board approved, we will then continue the work in the future year around stages 2 and 3. We also have some anticipated stage 1 curriculum writing areas for review that will start this summer. So if you recall, last summer we began a process called Curriculum Camp. We were having difficulty pulling teachers from their classrooms during the school day where they're missing instructional minutes, and we know that we don't have enough in-service time. So last year we were able to afford our teachers the opportunity to come together for 18 hours over a 3-day camp. We actually wore camping outfits. We had fire pits. We had the whole thing. And we were able to really engage our teachers in the process and get a bulk of the work done ahead of the school year. So we had to then lessen the burden on our teachers and our subs to pull them out of the classroom during this school year. So we are excited to have that curriculum camp again with my new partner, Natalie Franco. And so we have these areas for curriculum writing that will begin this summer for then approval next spring. You'll also see here there's a lot of language on the next 3 slides about the resources that we are asking for approval for. Of course, there are lots of costs that come with this, and we'll have some more information as we present each curriculum document to you over the next 2 months about these specific resources. You can see this slide talks about our mathematics resources, so we're going to engage in an iReady pilot at our K-5 level. We currently have iReady at the middle school level. We are looking to extend at the middle school level. As our principals just presented on the new schedule, we are looking to continue the personalized pathway. We had only purchased that for 1 year. So we have our core resource, which is our classroom instruction, and then we have the personalized pathway. So we're looking to continue that piece of the personalized pathway beyond this school year, as well as we are starting to engage in some curriculum review for our high school math courses. We also have our STEELS standards, our science, technology, and engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability standards. They are coming. We have just over a year before we have to implement them. So we are working diligently at all levels to realign our curriculum maps, either in the short term. Sometimes we have to kind of Band-Aid a little bit to make sure that we are aligned and fully meeting the expectations of the standards, and then making sure we engage in that full curriculum review process. So we are asking to extend some of our science resources at our elementary level so we can complete our math review at the elementary level. And then we are currently investigating resources at the middle level for a pilot next year. And we are working diligently to revise all of our high school curricula for the 25-26 school year. You can also see here there are multiple resources for the humanities side that we are seeking to bring for approval. Spanish, we're looking to update all of our Spanish resources as well as our K-5 art resources. We are currently investigating our ELA intervention resources, as you heard with that middle school schedule, as well as some special education and ELD resources. So with that, any questions?
We'll make one additional comment regarding curriculum, and that is that the reality of it is that during the time of COVID, there were some things that we weren't able to accomplish in PV, and that has some impact then on the number of curricular areas that are up for review. And we're trying to take a longer-term view of this so that the business office is well prepared to, understand the impact to our budget. When you have some big-ticket items put together in the same year, that has a blip of an implementation cost to it. So. We're working with the business office on that to be able to be-prepare not just for this coming year, but for succeeding years when we expect some of those to be some pretty big ticket items all hitting together at the same time.
I will also add that I think we are working to put a plan in place so that the 6-year cycle is really a sustained and effective cycle for all of our areas, that we're not kind of log jamming a bunch of core areas at the same time.
So with that, is there any board comment
Mrs.
or public comment?
Mrs. Mears has a
So
question.
if we could just, Mrs. Mayers, if we could have board questions and then, yep. Does anybody on the board have any questions?
I have a question about the Teach Town. Is that an online type of program, or is it like something that teachers would support students with? Oh, good. Okay.
There's both elements. There's physical resources as well as an online component to it. So
Okay.
there's FaceTime with a teacher, and then there's time on a learning platform for students to practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing no other board members, Mrs. Mears, you have a question?
That was part of my question. So how does Teach Town give students that need more support, how does that give them more access to the general education curriculum?
This is a resource primarily for our low-incidence students that might not have or be able to access the general education curriculum. This would be considered replacement instruction materials for those students, and it's primarily designed for K-5.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so Dr. Dietrich, you want to go ahead and talk
Okay,
about
we'll move then to
kindergarten?
the full day kindergarten. So success for me this evening will be for me to convey to you how excited I am about full day kindergarten here in Perk Valley. This is just super stuff, and I'm really thrilled to be able to talk again tonight about it. And we're going to kick it off with some reporting back on the visitation that we did to the North Penn School District on March 7th. We took a team of teachers, our kindergarten teachers who were available. That was most of them, not quite all of them. Those who were available, and a team of administrators to North Penn on the 7th of March. And the feedback on that from the team that visited was just outstanding. We had classroom observations, and then we had some time debriefing with the kindergarten teachers who we observed in action. And then we went over to the central office in North Penn, and we had administrator and early learning coordinator presentation, followed by questions and answers with them. The feedback again was outstanding on that. We saw some really effective play-based learning. If you want to advance the slide there. When the students arrive in the morning, that play-based learning is an integral part of the program. It does incorporate play as a central component of the learning process. It's an active engagement, exploration. It's meaningful and it's enjoyable. They use a lot of materials for the play-based learning that happens when students are arriving in the morning as a part of that. There's also play-based learning at times later in the day as a part of that North Penn curriculum and what the students experience in full-day kindergarten. One of the things that they learned was that the stamina of a student to be able to have full-day kindergarten was something that they had initially overestimated, and they realized that they needed to, and I'll get to a slide later in the titrated scheduling, but they realized that they needed to spend more time with students acclimating to a full day than they had anticipated they would need to. So you simply can't have students in kindergarten act like they're in first grade. It's not first grade, it's kindergarten. And there's a whole process of learning how to do school and enjoy the learning and engage with students in that active kind of learning. Here's the daily schedule. You had seen this earlier. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this tonight. We'll be revisiting it with the school board. We did want to include that when you have an opportunity, if you haven't already, to review these slides. But we'll revisit that at a subsequent meeting. And the next slide there, responsive classroom is something that North Penn uses, and we're looking at it for Perk Valley. It's very, very, very important that students, as I said earlier, learn how to do school and do it well when they're in kindergarten. So they use Responsive Classroom, and it's just a great, challenging, fun, and relevant way to promote that curiosity, that wonder, and that interest. We saw teachers teaching that Responsive Classroom where they were spending a lot of time on, how do you quiet your body? How do you interact with classmates? How do we treat one another? How do you treat the teacher? All of those things were really important part of their Responsive Classroom. And then if you want to move there, I talked earlier about titrated scheduling. So the schedule in January is different from the schedule in September. In September, they realized it takes more time for students to be able to acclimate to a full day of structured schooling. They found in their school district that they needed to build in some quiet time in the afternoon for students because they were seeing students really, starting to lag as the day went on. That wasn't as necessary then by January, February, or March. So there were adjustments that were made to the way they did their scheduling for having a different schedule in the start of the school year as compared to mid-year and by the end of the school year. Morning meeting is another thing that's an important part of the kindergarten program at North Penn. We do it here at Perk Valley. We learned some things with what they were doing in morning meeting at North Penn that we like to explore in greater detail. And then reporting on progress to parents is another area that we're continuing to work on as we adjust to a full day of kindergarten. Communication, we did have the Director of Community Engagement visit with us when we were at North Penn that day, and we got a lot of great ideas there. We are launching a PV full day kindergarten website. We intend to have bi-weekly newsletters with topics and tips. Those include some ELA and math readiness items, what we expect a child to be able to do when they come to us in kindergarten in those areas. Independence and tying their shoes or zipping their jacket or being able to independently use the bathroom. Just learning self-control and problem solving, working on fine motor skills, being able to eat lunch and be able to open their lunch container and how to do all of that is another thing that we need to communicate that children come to us to be able to do then. And then I'm excited to announce that we will have a full day kindergarten parent night. It'll be May 8th, 7 o'clock, virtual. So put that on your calendar. That'll be a night we'll be proudly sharing what we're doing, and we'll be able to tell our parents what they can expect with the full day kindergarten program. And then North Penn has an early learning coordinator, and Dr. Russell is going to take this slide. It has existed in the past here, so these next two slides are yours, Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich. So just because it came up as part of our conversation and discussion, I just want to put it out there for the board. We have had this position in the past, and it was extremely helpful in building relationships with preschools as well as developing our youngest learners. So in the event something works out that we're able to maybe reallocate a resource, this could be a very valuable addition to our team to support the efforts around full day kindergarten. So just putting that out there. There are other districts that also host this position. And then this year, we've had some challenges with the ways that we are using our buildings today and space. And so principals and I, administrators, are working carefully on the available space in our buildings and what we're projecting into the future. Based on full day kindergarten enrollments and special education needs, we have several autistic support classes in Skippack and at South, and with the ways that we are allocating space and consuming space, I would like to convene some conversations internally that may lead to something that is external or community-based in the form of a task force. But stay tuned for that. So I wanted to get that on your radar because we have some questions about what might happen if in the very near future. So in an effort to be proactive, take a deep dive into our facilities, I want to make sure we're maximizing what's available to our students and staff. So stay tuned.
Okay, our board comment, questions?
Anybody from the audience?
Anybody from the audience?
Okay, I think you're safe to go to
All
enrollment.
right, we'll move then to the enrollment and staffing update, and Dr. Russell, you can take this one off.
Yeah, so you see here, enrollment, current enrollment is along the top graph. It's indicated there next to the number 2, April 2024, and then number 3 represents projections. So students are actually rolled over, and it helps us to realize what may be in each of the grade levels next year. In this table, we have added 10% to our kindergarten numbers, and we see typically an 11% increase in first grade enrollment. So that's represented in the numbers, it's incorporated. And what's important to note right now is that based on class size guidelines, policy 126, if you look across the bottom, you see that right now, straight numbers, Evergreen could yield 2 teachers, while Schwanksville will remain the same, status quo. Skipback would benefit from 1, and South will remain status quo for a net -1 across the board if we see a 10% increase. So again, these are projections, and we continue to show these every month. On this slide, you see something very similar. Current enrollments across the top for April, as of April 24. And then the projections based on a 20% increase in kindergarten. So we're padding those numbers just to see what that means for us in terms of resources. And you can see if our kindergarten numbers increase 20% beyond what they are right now, that will mean Evergreen would only lose 1 staff member, or could only do with 1 less teacher. Schwanksville would need a teacher. Skipback would still need 1 teacher, and South would need a teacher. So there's a net need of 2 teachers. That looks different from the previous. So this is the exercise administration continues to move through as it considers enrollments and how they project for next year, and then drive staffing needs. This is the middle school. Middle school right now, based on enrollment projections, current, and then rolling over into next year, and considering the 5th graders and how they'll divide out to East and West, will lose 2 teachers, or can lose 2 teachers. Straight numbers based on class sizes. And the high school, you'll see a decline in its enrollment as projected for next year as you move across this chart, structured a little bit differently. But the staffing implications are viewed differently based upon the departments, the subjects, and the coursework. But we do see that trend downward, even into the high school then next year. So where are we with staffing? Again, this is a familiar chart. A couple of adds. We see the possibility, based on class size projections, of not only a 0, no net change in staff, but maybe we gain 1. Or if we go up that 20%, the elementary will need 2 teachers, while the middle level will have 2 teachers, most likely freed up, so there will be some shifting of staff. Over here, if we think about what's already in the budget, Mr. Weaver has already incorporated the addition of a special education teacher that's needed at the elementary level, again, based on early intervention numbers, those K through 2 numbers. This teacher would most likely, if approved, go to South, while at the middle level, we have a cohort of students moving up, and we'd like to add that special education teacher at East to lead those students. These have been a part of this chart since very early in the year, and they are a part of Mr. Weaver's budget. They've been incorporated. What you haven't seen incorporated yet is the idea of a dean of students or even an assistant principal, but something that emerged out of the data presentation conversation that the high school believes would benefit some of their work with the excessive attendance issues and some of the minor discipline issues. They have dean of students right now, teachers that cover certain periods of the day. This would be a full-time individual, or an assistant principal who, similar to a dean of students, primarily responsible for discipline, but has the authority to assign consequences. A dean of students, if that's a teacher, does not. So you see then the possibilities for the net changes. And the additions this month, are indicated in bold with the symbol there. Any questions?
We do want to remind those that are in the audience, those that are watching the live stream or the stream of this, if you know anyone who has a kindergarten child, please remind them to get their children enrolled in our system. We do have pretty much a leveling off right now of the enrollments that we're seeing into the system. There are also 29 entries that have been put in there with very minimal information that we cannot contact those individuals. So we're not certain what that means. So if you are one of those individuals, please complete the remainder of the process so we know which building to assign your child to. All right.
Okay, 4.02 we discussed already as part of the Education Committee of the Whole, so if there's no questions, we'll move that to consent. 4.03 is approval of a foreign exchange student, Matthew Dijon. My apologies for mispronouncing. If there are no questions, we'll move that to consent. Seeing none. 4.04 is approval of field trips. There's one for the Disney trip for class of 2025. If there are no questions, we'll move that to consent. And 4.05 is the enrollment report, which we just went over. So anything else? Any other questions or comments? Okay, that ends my section.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campley. Dr. Weston, Section 5, Business.
Thank you, Ms. White. Item 5.01, the Finance Committee of the Whole presentation. Mr. Weaver, may we have your report?
Already 9 o'clock, Mr. Weaver.
I know. I have 11 slides, so we'll move quickly into this. We'll have an updated E-rate adjustment, and no need for Mr. Ganesh to jump in there. I'll point out what 2 additional items we have on there. We're ratifying the furniture purchase for the full-day kindergarten program of a 23-24 general fund projection, a real quick review of where Amy and I think that we're going to be, recommendation for unassigned fund balance, and then a review of where we're at for the 24-25 general fund budget. We do have a lot of movement in there, so I'll spend some time on that side specifically because our time to review and get our budget right for 24-25 is coming to a close. We have a couple tonight and then 2 more meetings. We have a preliminary budget approval and then a final budget approval. So real quick, last month Mr. Ganesh presented his E-rate update. I am pleased to add there are 2 light green colored items that he is also entering into the E-rate replacement program, which includes the lower field and the fiber for the field house, and then also the cabling essentials that go along with that. We'll be getting 40% reimbursement on that. So that's just an adder. It needs to be approved by the school board, so I'm showing that, and there is a matching item in there. Moving on to the full-day kindergarten furniture approval, 5.03. There was a lot of good work led by Dr. Dietrich, Mrs. O'Sullivan, and their entire crew, picking up the ball from where Dr. Smith had left off in regards to actually getting these items in order, reviewed the spaces, the furniture needs. Emily Rice did a fantastic job along with the 4 elementary principals to get their act in order. Nice big spreadsheet, shared it with Mrs. Hurd and myself. Dr. Dietrich had many meetings. They hammered out the final items, and then they actually went out and got all the bid proposals associated with this through CoStars, Omnia, all different kinds of procurement platforms to help speed things through. These are the finals that we looked at with the vendors listed. The top right-hand corner, no, I'm sorry. Where am I at here? School specialty is the actual winner. It's also free freight associated with that. So a lot of people did a lot of good work. And so tonight we're just requesting that the board approve the school specialty via the Omnia procurement platform at a cost of $55,908.88. And again, special thanks to everybody that did the really good work, the grunt work so to speak, before they even brought it forward to Amy and I to review. So really good teamwork effort on that part. We were not invited to the fire pit, though. So next year, we will ask to be invited to the fire pit. Mrs. Hurd likes s'mores, so be sure that we get a few good ones in there. Something else, Amy? Yeah, who doesn't? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Any questions on that? So again, really good work. Couldn't be happier to present that tonight. General fund projection. This is our first look at that. The way that Amy and I do that is we look at the first 8 months of the year, compare that to the budget. We take in the audit results from last year and compare it to what I have already presented in the 24-25 budget. We kind of knock a lot of those things around, look at all 7,000 different line items. Some are in summary form, some we individually go into, like operations is a big one we go into for energy consumption, all of those types of things. And we come out with, hey, this is where we think we're going to end up. Essentially, this is a break-even point. So we started the year with an audited unassigned fund balance of $10,061,344. That's right at the 8% mark. And we figured that we will be at a $5,000 gain at this point in time. We have 2 more cracks at this for May and June before we get there. This is one of the more positive projections that Amy and I have put together probably in the past 15 years. We really feel comfortable with this at this point in time. Keep in mind when we look at, hey, Jim, unassigned fund balance is tapped at 8%, but you're showing that it's 7.711%. Remember, that cap, we have now moved forward to 24-25, and we're estimating our expenditures as of March of 2024. It's different tonight, $130,545,000. So that 8% where we were last year now goes down because the expenditures that we're comparing that 8% to go up. So we have some additional distance and delta to make up moving forward. Just a tracker for us. Any questions on that? Again, there are spreadsheets and spreadsheets in the past. We've kind of labeled them. We went through. There are some highlights to point out. Chief among them is that we are steady with our expenditures, but our earned income tax has really excelled. Really exceeded our budget, our actuals to budget at this point in time. And we are reflecting that already in 24-25 as a reflection. Interest earnings are up $500,000 over what we had budgeted. And again, that difference and that delta is also reflected in where we're at for 24-25 as of tonight. We don't see any alarming areas of severe over and under expenditures. So right now, we seem to be in pretty good shape with this. Again, it could always change. One more month might have something else that we didn't find in this first review. So that leads into recommendation to use unassigned general fund balance to offset the 24-25 general fund budget. To date, we have already reserved PSERS and debt service reserve. And right now, from our philosophical standpoint, to utilize unassigned general fund balance for future years increase, we are recommending to use $1 million of general fund unassigned fund balance. That is in the motion for tonight. And for instance, what I will present in the next couple of slides, that use of that $1 million will take our budgetary presentation for tonight at from 4.69, and yes, that is different than what was in March, down to a 3.43%. So again, we're offsetting, we're utilizing some things, and you'll see where that increase comes from. This is our philosophy. It has worked extremely well as we work as a team to get our budget together and in order, and we think it's prudent action. Just as a note, we have always utilized general fund, unassigned fund balance, plus other reserves in some manner to help us offset future tax increases. So this is a philosophy that we stand behind. It's tried and true, and it works for us. So I would offer that up as well. Any questions on that?
Do you mean we always do better than projected?
I think generally because we're conservative, yes. And I think the past couple of years, the pandemic really messed up all of our variables. We didn't think earned income tax would continue to grow. We thought everybody was going to be laid off when this happened, when the pandemic first happened. Instead, everybody came back. They didn't work in the city. They all came home. Well, now all that earned income tax is paid here. It's not paid into the city. For one instance, interest earnings. Well, The interest rates were negative at some point in time, interest earning rates at the beginning of the pandemic. It was a mess. We're now starting to see that they are starting to recover, and those alternative revenue sources are really starting to be strong in our projections. Okay, so to go down these line items, this is the interactive. I have circled the 3.43% where we're at tonight. Everything where it says April in the top part, which is the revenues, and then down below the expenditures, I'll go over. We add for interest earnings. We add for earned income tax increases, 250,000 and 200,000. The governor's budget proposal, base only, 238,401. And what that essentially is that is the number that is coming from the BEF. That is not a significant portion of our projected budget, is the adequacy component, which is almost $500,000. Overall, $700,000 gain. We're not getting good feelings from our friends in Harrisburg about the adequacy component of that. Because remember, that's built by taking dollars from other school districts to give to school districts that, like ourselves, have a higher tax burden. Keep in mind, we're lucky because of our makeup. Some school districts are 70% state. That's where some of those monies are going to come from. And so they're having a hard time with that, and I don't blame them. But yet, so we're not showing that part of it. So that will have to be subject to the entire budgetary process at Harrisburg. We'll only show what we feel we're being told will be put into the base funding formula. So if all else fails, they take out the adequacy. We're being told that what was in part of the basic education formula, which is the 238,000, is pretty significant and strong. And the power behind that is the surplus that the state has. No more, no less. Okay. We are reducing our Title I allocation to match the final 23-24. We received letters on that already, so I'm reflecting that adjustment. I'm adding FICA and PSER's revenue. Now remember, that's a negative overall because I'm also adding twice the expenditure as part down below. And then we're adding and recognizing, based upon some conversations that we've had, the state funding for the youth detention center. Notice it's a revenue stream at the top and it's an expenditure stream at the bottom, so it's a net wash for the school district. For 24-25, that's what we have. Total revenues, $129,030,221. On the expenditure side of things, there are a vast number of different expenditures. Most of them are adding to the expenditures, but that's okay. That's part of the budgetary process that we go through. Things are looking like they're coming solid now, and we can now count on these numbers moving forward. We're adding for a municipal lease that we talked about, the Operations, Safety and Operations Committee for custodial equipment and some trucks. We're working on the lease components. We'll bring that back in May. That's our anticipated cost. We have movement across the scale for our teachers, which we have to show. And one of the things that we do know is that our tuition, as a correlation expenditure to that, our tuition reimbursements are up. So we know that that's an indication that, hey, tuition reimbursements going up, that's over our budgetary perspective and our allotment. That also means many more teachers are moving across the column, not just down in step, but across the column. When we negotiate the steps. The movement across the column is all about the employees moving from one column to the other. Doing that means that we have to recognize those additional salaries associated with that, and they're in the matrix themselves. We can support that figure going forward. The adjustment for the FICA and PSERS is exactly twice what is the revenue stream up above. We're showing a minor increase for athletics for reconditioning helmets. That's important. You're saying, Jim, why is $3,000 important? That's important for Mr. Felty because his athletics budget really isn't too big. So it's important that when we do that, we assign that and we put that in there, and then we can track that. And if he's not going to use it for something else for 25-26, then we'll actually remove it from his budget. It's like a one-time hit for him. We're adding $40,000 for full-day kindergarten supplies. That is $10,000 per building. That's just supplies. That's not furniture. Additional software curriculum needs. We continue to work with Mr. Ganesh Dr. Dietrich and the entire staff on our entire software curriculum. And those are the needs that we seem fit at this point in time. I will mention that the curriculum team department, Mr. Ganesh, he includes Mrs. Hurd and myself. We continue to work on that figure. So that is a conservative figure at this point in time. They're continuing to look at usage reports, and hopefully that number may come down over the next couple of months. We add for the final VOTEC budget that was finally passed. We're now recognizing an additional increase of $66,000. Standard practice at this point in time. We're adding for additional curriculum needs, as Mrs. O'Sullivan and Dr. Dietrich just pointed out. That is a $250,000 increase. Keep in mind that's after we take into consideration the uses of $506,000 of Ready to Learn grant monies, other additional monies that we have set aside and grants already used for that, plus the curriculum budget to go to offset that. So here begins the build up that we need for that 6-year cycle program that we're recognizing and moving forward. The third look number for the Bucksmont, that's the one positive on the expenditure side. It was at a 6.2%. That came down to a 6.0%. Myself, Mr. Moran, and some Bucksmont people, Mr. McGill, we sat on a webinar today to look at alternatives and some options. At this point in time, the 6% is going to stick, and we're going to feel comfortable with that moving forward. We've already put that into the budget, so for us, it's a kind of a reduction. And then the final line item there is for the Youth Detention Center. Total expenditures, $133,293,015. When you look at that and you look at what the recommended fund balance usage for the unassigned fund balance, that brings our shortfall down to $2,711,145. That drives a 3.43% tax increase as of tonight. Questions? Again, this seems like a pretty normal budget year, to be honest with you. We're kind of steamrolling now. Preliminary budget approval in May. We'll do the advertisement for that, and then final budget in June. The last remaining part of this is we do have a bond refunding on the 4th. All variables look good for that. Again, as I always say, and Jamie doesn't like it when I say this, but when bad things happen in the world, we tend to do good for our bond issues because it's that flight to security into bonds. Again, the world hasn't fixed itself, and so there's still fear out there in the markets. So bonds are good. For coming up, we have a reaffirmed AA rating that we've done a really good job as a team to go on from our bond rating call. So we're very proud of that. Again, we'll continue to monitor and adjust. So the bond refunding, and then if the state gets its act together and gives us a final budget, then we'll have some final numbers there.
Questions?
Yes.
The true-up costs aren't utilized, are not yet utilized?
That is correct.
What happens when they are?
So, as Dr. Russell was explaining, a couple of things. One, we either say, okay, we don't need those true-up costs, we take them out. That's a deduction come June. Dr. Russell looking for additional resources to pay for additional positions, as she just mentioned. As our team gathers and determines what those final needs are, that's the variation and the play in the hedge that we have to be able to meet those needs.
And then the positions you were talking about earlier when we got to education, there are 9 additional positions in this, including this budget includes the Dean of Student Success?
Yes, that's correct.
So some of those positions are support, though.
Yeah.
Just to call out, they're not all professional.
Correct.
9 sounds like a large number, but you're right. Dean of Students is not in there yet. No.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
we
sorry.
added it in February.
I misspoke. I'm sorry.
No,
We
no.
added it in February. I apologize. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's one teacher at East, one teacher, one para at East, one teacher, one para at South, 4 paras at elementary school, 1 cafeteria, Dean of Success. My question would be, does that cover all of your needs, your expected needs?
So
Is that the right number? 10?
I mean, right now, you heard me tonight introduce this idea of an early childhood coordinator to really oversee early literacy development and our youngest learners, especially with full day kindergarten. So what I'm looking at with Mr. Weaver and the team is there a teacher that might retire or resign that we don't need to replace because of declining enrollment? Can we reallocate that resource? Otherwise, I think it could be a very valuable resource as we've taken our dive into full-day kindergarten to continue to make sure that program is as strong as it could be. That's what I would add at this point, or indicate to you there may still be that need out there.
So, okay. So that would have to be next month because we vote in June, right?
Yeah, so great point, and that's a teaching position, not an admin position, just to
Yeah.
clarify. We are meeting with each of our principal teams this week to discuss staff, and we sometimes work through some of those potential shifts based on where the enrollments are looking and projected. So we should be able to share an update with the board in the next week or two. And then, yes, if we would add that, it would come very soon. Yes.
Okay. So then my other question is, so I've mentioned this every year, but on the board, student population going this way, budget goes this way, and now we see the increase in technology is now $250,000. Is that year over year, or is that we're now increasing the technology budget by $250,000?
Which part of it? The 200
Technology increase total by 276,000, 208 lease, 10 supplies, 58 curriculum software.
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do with the technology leases.
1 year increase, or is that
So
would
those-
be the expectation for 26, 27 as well?
So those leases are typically spread out over a number of years. So those numbers are in those figures for at least the next three to 4 years.
Okay.
Those are not one-time hits.
Yeah.
So the E rebate is not on this slide though, correct?
I'm not, so I'm looking at the other slide that was presented to the other data points that were presented to the board, not this one.
Not the overall budget you're not talking about in terms of the technology budget?
It's the 34-page presentation that he sent out. Yeah,
No,
it would
no,
break
I
down the
understand.
budget by steps.
But from a bottom line standpoint, is that 250, some of that's offset with the E rebate? Do I
You mean
understand
the E-rate?
The
I think,
E-rate?
yeah, I think Mr. Ganesh will speak
Okay.
to that.
So there are two components. One is the software. That's about $270,000. That's because we are renewing software. That's a 6-year. We renew software. We buy software for 6 years. So this is a renewal here. Hence a $275,000 addition to the software. And for the technology budget itself, again, the lease things we are renewing. We are replacing labs and stuff like that. So that's a one-time expense that we incur every 4 or 5 years. So this expense, based on when the leases falls off, next year would be different. So this is not an addition to the technology budget forever.
Potential every 3 or 4 years, or every 5 to 6 years, there's a bump.
Right. Whenever there's a lease or a software that's a multi-year purchase, you would see this bump, and then the next year it'll go off, or next year it'll taper off.
So,
Okay.
so remember the way that the leases work, however, and the way that we've designed our program is that every year certain grades get certain new computers every 4 years. So yeah, 4 to 5 years. So the leases run 3 to 4 years depending upon rate. So we do have a couple of years there where we're coming off of a heavy load cycle the past several years, ramped up, and now we're kind of ramping back up again as we get into this cycle coming out of the pandemic on a one-to-one platform.
But the basis of it, though, because it's cyclical, there was already cost savings with certain components of it that were realized that these numbers could have potentially been even higher based on like repair costs, things like that, when things go out of warranty. All of those different things are savings that were realized based on implementing this particular cycle.
Yes, absolutely.
Just a couple more questions.
Please.
See if we're almost to a finalized budget. Are the Bucksmont stats final, or are we still waiting?
No, they're final.
They're final?
Yep. Our
So-
phone
so it's-
call, our webinar today made them final.
Okay. That's it for me.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. So looking at the tax rate increases that was put up quickly, in the last 5+ years or so, the tax rate looked like it was 1.5 to 2.6 was the range as a taxpayer, 3.43%. I understand that the tax rate can change. I'm just asking that that comes down by a full percentage point, if not more, to be more in line what we see, what has happened in past years. And also, I also support just looking again and looking at our decreasing enrollment, that why we added dean of students. We have 50+ students that we're going down in the high school. And yes, we're adding all-day kindergarten. That's fantastic, but enrollment overall continues to decrease, and we continue to add administrators. It seems like we're really getting top-heavy, which also impacts our taxes. Thank you.
Ms. White.
I just had a comment too about the youth detention center. I saw there was 2.5 million that was looks like it was covered. Is that just for 1 year? Is that something that's just always going to happen every single year, or does that have to be renegotiated every single year with the state?
Actually, that's a 1 year. That's this year's allotment. And yes, we will be in conversations again years moving forward.
All right, Mr. Saylor.
I was talking to Dr. Russell, and I might have told you about the conversation. I forgot when the conversation was. I don't think it was recently, but we have, yeah, it was recently. I had friends of mine that moved into our school district, specifically left specifically left where they lived in Worcester, came to Skipback because of our autistic programs. And some of these things, I think from a budgetary standpoint or a lay standpoint, I still struggle with, I don't struggle with conceptual understanding of it, but I think when we talk about our school budget, there is this, and I smile because I have this conversation with myself at nights when we get closer to June. School boards don't control a lot of the budget. And such a uneducated word, but we don't control a lot of the budget. There's PSERs, there's teacher salaries, but more specifically, when our special needs programs grow, there's a law out there that says that we need to have the tools, technologies that go into that. And I think sometimes, I've said to you before, hey, when our student base goes this way, why does this go that way? But in the back of my head, I also know that there's a large student base that's growing that cost more. It's not dollar for dollar. It could be $7 to $1 for that student base. I think sometimes we could do in these presentations, and not criticizing the presentations, here are all the things that are out of our control. Yeah, we don't control PSERs, although we do get money back from the state, but that's after our budget's passed. Like, our school budget will be passed. The whole system is set up like it's not really, if you were doing a budget from scratch, it would be, we wouldn't be passing our budget till the state passes their budget, and it would be a whole system that's not necessarily there, which is why sometimes, Rowan, you alluded, we'll be putting money back in because we have more money than we budget, because sometimes we're passing ours before they pass theirs, and it's a weird setup. But there's parts of the budget that we don't control as a school district. So I know I come off when I say it's going here, but yet we're going there. I know there's a lot that goes into why it goes up, but I think we could do a better job educating everyone else on really why that issue is. Even with the PSERs, I knew when I got elected that PSERs is something that we don't control. But I didn't know that the state does also, they give you money after our budget is passed that goes back into our school budget, which is one of the reasons why we have money in our unaccounted fund balances. And it's just something I think we could try to work on to help with understanding, what the budget's really about. What, 5% maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just, about 5%.
And to Dr. Russell, to your point about the staffing slide, when you showed the different allocations of staff, the district office is not looking to add any staff, and you have because of enrollments in various levels, you're going to have teachers that you're going to be able to allocate for different roles. So like the early childhood, there needs to be somebody at the helm of initiatives that we're looking to grow. So, when we're looking to make sure that our special education students and our department is a desirable place for students that need that support, there needs to be resources in place for that, above and beyond, in some instances, what's federally mandated by law. And I think that overall the district and the board is very supportive of like those types of cost-heavy initiatives in allowing the resources to be in place for student success in those areas, but then also like examining different ways to be creative. Jim, what I appreciate about your budget, because from a money standpoint, it's just not my forte. So when you talk about the conservative nature of the way that you run the numbers, and Mr. Keenan even alluded to the fact that whatever you point out, we always do better, And so over my time on the board, it's always been that case. It's kind of in the back of my mind that this is the worst case scenario type of thing. And, just being on conversations with the PSBA, the roundtable that the different folks have been talking about with regards to the budget reallocation of resources, districts surrounding us are angry about what we'll be getting and what they're not getting.
Right.
And so, because we are such a burdened district in terms of, the tax burden is tremendous, and it's on all of us because we all live here.
Right.
But at the same time, Mr. Saylor, you make a really excellent point, and ways that we can show this to not have like fire alarms go off, that
Right.
this is, the world is on fire.
And then, so there's two things to that. I'm going to put you on the spot. I do it every year. I know you don't like it. I don't see that number going down past 3.27, 3.15. Do you?
Well, not necessarily. However, bond refunding, again, depending on how good. Remember, Jamie is also conservative, so she was in that 500,000 range. If that's $600,000-700,000, then we've got something to talk about to maybe make a difference. But you're right.
So so what is that 200,000 for? What is the DS increase of 200,000? 205,000 per PFM schedule. That's 200. That's a positive for us.
That was a level funding bump.
Yeah. Can't get
Moving
higher.
forward, that was right from the schedule.
Okay.
They said if we didn't do any refunding or anything like that, we didn't add to that, that's what you're going to go up.
And when is the bond refunding finalized that we might see
So it happens on the 4th.
Of April?
Yes.
Okay.
Couple of days, at 11 to 11:30, and we'll be sure that we share.
So a good sale could show the tax burden go down?
Yep, but then remember, we're always, so we don't want to make a huge hole because it's level. So if we make a huge hole the next year, then we've got to make up the hole plus go up.
Yeah.
So we're always conservative, but that gives us options. So maybe we leave half of it in there and we build it. It's called, leveraging your millage, softening your millage over the couple of years. So, and that we were really good at when we were building, when we added $90 million worth of debt. That was our process and our philosophy. Yeah. We knew the debt was coming, so we added debt the year before we went out for bonds. And then for 5 straight years, we added bonds. And then we built that debt over time. It was 4 years of bonds, but it took us 7 or 8 whole years to work that entire debt into our millage.
Yeah.
So as to soften the impact.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're not done yet, but I would venture to say that you're probably closer. When we started our budget process back in October, Amy and I looked at each other and we said probably somewhere 275 to 325. So this is higher than where we thought we would be. So rest assured, we continue to work on it.
And just out of curiosity, there's no way things go kablooey on the 4th where it's a bad bond sale?
That can always happen. It has not happened for us yet.
He's like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Like, why are you saying that to him? He's going to be
So
You're setting him up.
Can I call you this morning at 3 o'clock when I wake up?
Hey, you can. I might be up thinking about it myself.
All right. Well, hopefully it's good news. Hopefully. All right. And just one last thing, because it's time to show just what the tax impact would be if the 343 would go out right now. So that's it. Any other questions? Anyone? Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Weaver, for your presentation. Next item, item 5.02, approval of updated E-rate purchases. The request to ratify the purchase of technology items. This was discussed as part of the presentation. If there's no comments or questions on here, we can put that on consent. Seeing none, item 5.03, approval of furniture purchase for full-day kindergarten. Again, the request is to ratify the purchase of furniture for the kindergarten classes as discussed in Mr. Weaver's presentation. If there are no comments or questions, any discussion on this item? If not, we can move this to consent. Item 5.04, approval to use the unassigned fund balance. The request to approve the use of $1 million in the unassigned fund balance to help offset the 24-25 general fund budget as covered in the discussion. Any further questions or comments on this item? If not, we can put that on consent. Item 5.05, the approval of the trash and recycling agreement. This is a request to approve a 3-year agreement for trash and recycling services with Waste Management at a cost of $259,592.16, as reviewed and recommended by Safety and Operations. Are there any comments or questions, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, we can put that on consent. Item 5.06, the approval of the bus drivers and aides is already on consent. 5.07, approval of 23-24 special education contracts and costs of services. Do we mean 23-24 or 24-25?
We mean this year. Sometimes there are a few additions that come
Okay.
through during the course of the year.
Very good. This is a request to approve special education contracts and costs of services for the 23-24 school year. Are there any questions or comments or discussion on this item? If not, we can move that to consent. Item 5.08, approval of confidential settlement and release agreement. The request to approve a settlement and a release agreement in lieu of FAPE. If there's any comment or question? Seeing none, we can put that on consent. Item 5.09 is the approval of another confidential settlement and release agreement. If there are no discussion, no comments or questions, we can put that on consent. Item 5.10, is a placeholder. Item 5.11, the approval of contracting services with the MCIU. This is a motion to approve contracting services with the MCIU to provide educational programming to the students at Southeast Youth Development Center beginning on or before August 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, contingent upon acceptance of terms by the superintendent and Levin Legal Group. Cost to contract the services will be paid for by the Commonwealth and fall within the budgeted allocation. Is there any comment or question on this item? Seeing none, we can put that on consent. Item 5.12, approval of volunteer truck drivers as listed. Any comment or discussion on this item? Seeing none, we can move that to consent. Item 5.13, the approval of home and school grant for Skipback Elementary. There's a request to approve a grant from the Skipback Home and School in the amount of $29,000 to purchase 2 cantilever umbrellas and install permanent structures to support the shades over the existing outdoor classroom area at Skipback. Any discussion or comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we can move to consent. Item 5.14, the approval of the PCCD Safety and Security Grant. There's a request to approve PCCD Safety and Security Grant to purchase exterior doors at Evergreen Elementary. Any comments or questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. And finally, item 5.14 is the grants and donations report. Are any comments or questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, that ends section 5.
Dr. Weston, thank you so much. Section 6, payment of bills, Mr. Fountain.
Mine will be very short and sweet. 6.01 and 6.02 will both be dealt with next week, and that concludes my section.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Professional personnel, Mr. McKinney, Section 7.
7.01 is on consent, acceptance of resignations and retirement. 7.02 is also on consent, approval of leave of absence. 7.03 is a placeholder, approval of long-term substitute extended daily substitute appointments. 7.04 is already on consent, approval of spring coaches for 2023-2024. 7.05 is on consent, approval of summer 2024 extended school year professional appointments. 7.06, approval of mentors for 2023 is already on 2023-2024 is already on consent. 7.07, approval to create professional positions. Request to approve the creation of 2 special education professional positions as part of the PVEA agreement. The need for these positions is based on the number of students qualifying for services. Is there any discussion? Any questions, any comments? Having heard none, we will move that to consent. That is my section, Ms. White.
Mr. McKinney, thank you so much. Section 8, Mrs. Sadler, support personnel.
8.01, acceptance of resignations and retirements is already on consent. 8.02, approval of leaves of absence is already on consent. 8.03, approval of support appointments is already on consent. 8.04, approval of community education appointments is already on consent. And 8.05, approval of 2024 ESY support appointments is already on consent. That completes my section.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadler. Section 9, governance. Mr. Liggett, do not disappoint us.
Oh, of course
Keep
not.
it moving along.
There are 6 policies that are attached.
We will read them word for word.
Yes, and notating the punctuation as we go. 6 policies are attached for first reading this month that came up from the policy committee. Are there any questions on that? Okay. 9.02 is the approval to have a second reading on on 7 policies. If there are no questions or comments about these 7 policies, I'll ask to move them onto consent for next week's agenda.
I have a question about 1.09 resource materials.
You want to address that now, or you want to just pull it off consent?
Pull it
It's
off
second read, so, I mean,
Pull it off consent and talk about it next week. since
Okay.
it's late.
all right, so that was 109, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And then we're okay with the other 6 policies being on the consent agenda?
If you're asking me,
I am, because you objected to 109.
I am.
Why don't we just pull off the second
We
reading
can.
from consent, and we can just discuss
That's
it
fine.
next
We-
week when there's not such a heavy burden.
No problem.
Okay.
Sorry for taking more time.
No, you're good. It's really not you. It was.
Yeah,
Mr.
I know.
Saleh,
I'm
but-
not pointing any fingers or anything.
I mean.
So my 27-minute planned board comment's not
Yeah,
going to
wait,
be happy?
he has it. Wait, let me.
Yeah. Best of this.
You're right. He's going to air all of his grievances.
All right.
Right.
And the third and final section of the governance section
Yeah, I'm going to do a big build-up for this
Yep.
for you. Yep. We need to approve a representative for the MCIU board for next week. Would you, Ms. White, would you like to comment on that any further?
Yes, so with regard to that, your term, Mr. Keenan, is up at the end of the year, and Mr. Liggett raised his hand to volunteer to be appointed based on the superintendent's memo last week. So this, I guess, would be a motion to approve a representative request for the approval of Robert Liggett to the Perkiomen Valley School District's representative of the MCIU Board of Directors for a 3-year term beginning July 1, 24, ending in June 27. So, I guess can I so move? That's not my
We
second.
put that on consent, or do we make a motion
right now,
now?
my name.
No, it's a proposed motion that would be voted on
Okay.
next week. It can be either consent or non-consent. I mean, if someone does not want it on consent, it does not go on consent. Mr. Keenan, did you want that removed from the consent agenda?
No, we could vote on it right now.
No, I think
You don't want to wait till next week.
Normal practice
Just to,
would be.
I mean, he could change his mind.
Isn't there a meeting for you to
You
go
know what?
to
That's a
this
solid.
week?
That's a solid point that he could change his mind
could.
because people weren't batting down the door after the memo.
Well, are we sure we don't want to give people more of an opportunity to?
Nope. I think it's
Really?
pretty
Because-
much set in stone. I wrote it down. So anyway, so in the memo this week, Dr. Russell had asked for anyone to reach out. Mr. Liggett was the only one that reached out with interest with regard to appointment for that position.
I'd
So
prefer for there to be a debate on this.
we should
You
debate
know,
it.
Bob,
Big
I
back and
read the
forth.
Why don't we
memos.
leave it off consent
I don't
then?
recall that being in the memo, so I totally missed my opportunity. So God bless you, man. It's awesome.
So
Right on.
We'll leave it on consent then.
I think that's good. Move along.
Okay. All right. And that there
Are you
ends
out of
your-
snacks, Tammy?
Does that end your section, Bob?
It does end my
Oh,
section.
fabulous. Section
It was
10,
entertaining,
closing
at least.
items. Comments from the audience on any topic. Same rules apply as the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone in the audience that has something to say for 3 minutes? Mrs. Leonetti. You gotta just, yep.
Again, sorry about that. I just wanted to comment on the vaping detectors. I want to thank you guys for being proactive and for implementing a program for that. I do want to mention that it should not be just focused on tobacco, but also on THC, because I think we're all aware that a lot of these kids are vaping THC. It starts in the middle school. So I thank Dr. Campley for bringing that up, because I do think this needs to be in the middle school. It really is a huge problem. I want to share with you, my kids were raised in New Jersey, and when we were back there, they used to do lockdowns. I know it's not a popular thing, but it does stop a lot of this behavior. You know, if for example, if an administrator or a teacher gets some information that kids might have drugs in their backpacks or in their lockers, they call the police, and the police come in and they do a lockdown. It scares the crap out of the kids, and it does stop a lot of the drugs. They always caught something when they did it in my kids' schools. They did it in public school, and they did it in private schools. So I would recommend something like that. I know it's tough love, and it's hard to do it for the first few times, but it shows that the actions have consequences, and I really do think that will help stop the drug problem at this school. Back when my kids were in school, heroin was a problem. A lot of kids started on the Oxycontin from being injured in athletics or whatever, and they moved to heroin. I'm hearing it's meth here in Pennsylvania, and that's a scary thing. And there are kids that are doing meth. Hopefully the drug-sniffing dogs can catch that. I do know they can catch the THC. I know that they talked about that with the vaping, that they can't get the vaping, but I think the THC they can, because you can smell THC in a vape. So I would think the dogs could catch that. So that was just my comment for that, and I just do feel like the fear will, reduce the use of drugs in the school, and I agree with Mr. Saylor. Consequences for all of this are very important, and they have to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Comments from board members, 10.02. Mr. Saylor?
Yes.
Anything? Yankees. Well, the Yankees are about to play the Diamondbacks. Okay. Anyone else? I think we're all good. Okay. It's actually earlier than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. Education meeting, I was like, I got a little nervous there, Dr. Dietrich. Okay, video disclaimer, 10.03. Notice of video disclaimer. 10.04 is adjournment. I just want to say that we had an executive session for the purpose of personnel and legal. Yep, thank you. Have a great night. See you next